right, looks like we're ready to go. I'll call the regular meeting of the Lakewood City Council on October 14th, 2019 in council chambers to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Paul.
Here.
Roybal.
Here.
Gutwein. Skilling. LaFleur.
Here.
Abel.
Here.
Vincent. Here. Beta.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Franks. Here. Harrison.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome you all to City Council this evening, and would like to ask if you do have a cell phone to please put it on silent, and like to welcome those watching at a future date. I'm going to go a little bit out of order for a couple things. Before we get to the Pledge of Allegiance, I want to mention a couple people because we always stand and kind of take a moment of silent prayer. And in that, I'd like to encourage us to remember two wonderful community members, and that is Miss Betty Proctor, who passed away, I think, this morning or yesterday morning, and was an incredibly kind woman and did incredible things for those who most needed it in our community. So let's remember her. And then a very special person, and we are honored because his son works for us at the City of Lakewood, and we did a proclamation to honor Mr. Ruben A. Valdez. And so we have a proclamation, but I want to just share with you a couple of really cool things about Mr. Valdez. And he was a Lakewood resident who was born in Trinidad, Colorado in 1937. The youngest of 9, dropped out of high school to support his family by working in Pueblo in a brick factory. Mr. Valdez moved to Denver, finished high school, and obtained a bachelor's degree in political science from Laredo Heights while serving in the General Assembly. Mr. Valdez was a member of the Colorado House of Representatives, House Minority Leader, and was the first Hispanic Speaker of the House. Mr. Valdez was a statesman, a trailblazer, a strong advocate for workers, consumer protections, and equity in education. And the Denver Public Schools honored Mr. Valdez in 2015 by naming the Ruben Valdez Achievement Campus at 2626 West Evans. And Mr. Valdez served as Regional Director of the United States Department of Transportation under the Carter administration, worked for Governor Richard Lamb, was the Executive Director of the Department of Social Services, and had a joint position as Executive Director of the Department of Labor. Mr. Valdez dedicated his life to serving our state and our country. He fought for our shared values and worked tirelessly to uplift all Coloradans, and his leadership has left a remarkable legacy on our state. So I want to thank the Valdezes who are here with us tonight. What a wonderful man. Many of us got to know him, and we are sending actually something, I think, with you to Italy to honor an uncle as well. So as we rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, let's please remember these wonderful folks. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. All right. Will the clerk please read item 4?
Item 4, presentation, Head Start Annual Report.
All right. Mr. Behringer, you're going to come on down. This is, I think, one of council's favorite parts of the year is when we get a hear a Head Start update and then see from our wonderful Head Start students. And I know they love coming to council.
Yes, I'll try to keep it brief so we can get to the good stuff. Good evening, Mayor Paul, members of council. Thank you for hosting us tonight. It's a pleasure. I get the honor of presenting to you the annual report from the 2018-2019 school year. And as you'll see in the report, it was another exceptional year, and a lot of thanks to you and the staff for all they do to make sure that that happens each year. As in years past, you'll receive all the pertinent data. And this year, I'm going to do it in a way that tries to walk you through what it might be like to go through a year of Head Start with our students. So it all starts in with one of our 3 administrative staff. When you either call or stop by the Wilbur Rogers Center, you're provided a complete overview of the program requirements and how to go about getting enrolled in our program. Once your eligibility is determined, an appointment is scheduled with one of our family support workers or home visitors in order to complete the required paperwork. Throughout this 90-minute meeting, the staff member will begin forming a relationship with you that will last the entire year. In fact, it's not uncommon for this relationship to last far beyond that first year as they gain trust of each other. During this initial appointment, you are also greeted by either our health and safety coordinator or our nutrition coordinator to have your height and weight measured as a baseline staff can use throughout the year to ensure proper physical development. The health and safety coordinator will also work with your family so you have access to the health and dental care needed during your formative years. Additionally, the nutrition coordinator will work with our food service provider to deliver breakfast, lunch, and snacks for you each and every day. By the end of the year, nearly 40,000 meals are provided to the children in our care, and you probably ate about 425 of those meals. Now that you are enrolled in one of our 5 Head Start classrooms, it is time for the school year to begin. Classes typically start the 3rd week in August and run from approximately 8 a.m. to 2:15 p.m. unless you are at our full-day site that runs from 7 a.m. to 5:45 p.m. When you arrive your first day, you are greeted by a teaching team that consists of a lead teacher, a co-teacher, and a classroom assistant. Your name will already be on a cubby so that you have a place to store your belongings. Your teachers will do everything they can to make you feel welcomed, and at least one of the teachers will be fluent in Spanish if that's your primary language. You will learn in different ways, such as large group time, small groups, and experiential learning, all of which is tracked by Teaching Strategies Gold at 3 checkpoints: fall, winter, and spring. Looking at the chart, you'll notice that your scores in each of the 6 domains are low in the fall, but very high by the spring assessment. Your teachers will be assisted in the classroom from time to time by one of the 3 mental health therapists that make up our Youth and Family Services team. They will use the Pyramid Plus model to assist teachers in learning how to best handle difficult situations while providing parenting classes throughout the year. They will also observe the classroom to get to know you and help teachers address emotional and behavioral challenges you or your peers might exhibit. Finally, they will offer free short-term counseling sessions to any of our program participants in need of a little extra support. Your peers are a diverse group from all over Lakewood. Due to various circumstances, some of your classmates will move during the year, but new friends will join your class along the way. All totaled, there will be 157 children enrolled throughout the 2018-2019 school year. Your family background will be similar to your peers, with some families having both parents in the house and others raised by a single parent. Sometimes other parental figures, such as grandparents or older siblings, play a key role in your development. A handful of your friends will have a parent or guardian serving in the military to help protect our country. In addition to your classroom activities, you and your family will also have opportunity to participate in numerous family engagement activities during the year. Your care provider can attend parenting classes on topics ranging from nutrition, budgeting, successfully transitioning to kindergarten, housing options, job training, and so much more. You will also have the chance to participate in 2 social events meant to provide you with a sense of community. And one of the highlights from the past year was when Dr. Deborah Bergeron visited our Head Start program. She's the national director of Head Start. And that was a great honor to have her in our class. And as you can see, she was very engaged with the children, even brought her guitar and played them a song on the playground. That was fun to see. So that was a great honor. And of course, all of the above activities would not be made possible without a great deal of support behind the scenes. The Head Start Advisory Committee, comprised of Counselor Abel, Franks, and Vincent, and the Head Start Policy Council, comprised of program parents or guardians, provide governance oversight through monthly meetings. They help staff by guiding policy discussions, reviewing program expenditure reports, and making decisions about the Head Start program. As a whole, the Lakewood City Council holds the legal and financial responsibility for the Head Start program you are in, including approving the application for Head Start funding. In the 2018-19 school year, the overall program budget was $1,283,026. Of that, $1,096,766 was for Head Start, and $186,260 was for Early Head Start. In addition to that funding, we also are required to match $1 of the federal funds that we receive with 20% of every dollar. So that breaks out as follows. You see the table there, and we had a non-federal match of $312,564 for the school year, bringing our total operating budget to almost $1.6 million. Those funding sources allow us to meet your needs and the needs of all of our program participants. Of course, money alone isn't enough. To provide a high-quality education for the 110 children in our program, it takes a dedicated staff, family involvement, volunteers, and community support. So in closing, as a member of Head Start, you are known and valued. Our hope is that you and your family feel confident and prepared for the future, and we hope to hear some similar quotes to those that are on the screen. One of which, I like the third one, the goals that were set in the beginning has been met exceedingly, and it's just amazing. All the help when needed, the concerns, the applause, and just the way I picked my daughter up all smiling and happy. I'm glad that I picked this specific school. And now for the best part, and we're going to invite some of the Head Start children up and their families. They've got a little gift for you and just a way to say thank you for all your support throughout the school year.
And if anybody wants to take pictures with the little ones up here, you're more than welcome. Yeah.
And these are members from our Lasley Head Start location, right near at Lasley Elementary School. And special thanks to Ceci and Kathy and Marika and Paola for helping assist.
For those of you that are wondering, it's a notepad with a pencil, and it says Head Start, City of Lakewood. And if it's like last year's, it's got pictures that the children have drawn on each page of the notepad. It is phenomenal.
Thank you.
And if anybody's interested in seeing the full report with all of the information presented, it's available online at www.lakewood.org/headstart. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Great. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate all that you do, all that the teachers and volunteers and parents. It's an incredible program, and these are very, very important people because they'll be leading our community here before too long. So I'm going to turn it over to our chairwoman of the committee, Councilor Vincent.
Yes. Hi, I just want to say thank you. This is the best committee to be assigned to. It's wonderful. And I think it's, for those of you who don't know, I think the most impressive thing is where these kids start out at the beginning of the year and then where they end up at the end of the year. It's just phenomenal. And then the people and the support. And I think you open it up if people want to come and tour, or am I incorrect in that?
No, you can call.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Because we've been there. So you two do an awesome job, and I just want to thank you.
Anything else? All right. Well, thank you very much. Nice presentation. And again, thank you all for coming here tonight. They are. All right. So next up, we have public comment. This is the point in the meeting where the public is invited to address the city council on items that did not appear on the agenda. All comments should be directed to the city council. I ask that all in attendance observe the decorum of city council chambers and refrain from applause or audible support or discord with the speaker. The time limit is 3 minutes. I think there's a timer now, and the lights will go green for 2.5, yellow for 30, and at 3 minutes it'll go red, and I'll politely try to wrap it up. If you didn't have a chance to sign up and you wish to speak, please stop by and see the clerk so we can make sure we get your information for any sorts of follow-ups that we might have. So first up, I have Commissioner Ty. And I have Sheriff Schrader, and I have Pete Ware, and then James Mace.
Always hard to follow kids.
I know.
Good evening. My name is County Commissioner Casey Ty, and thank you for letting us speak. I want to talk to you about 1A. The Board of County Commissioners referred 1A to the ballot for the voters to consider, and I want to talk to you about why personally I am supporting 1A. Similar to what Lakewood did several years ago, this is an opportunity for the county to look at some Tabor relief. The county budget has been able to keep up with expenses and needs in the county because the Tabor formula that allows for the growth just isn't keeping up with government expenses. As you know, the Tabor growth formula is consumer price index plus local build. Consumer goods have not been keeping up with some of the challenges we have in the county. Several years ago, we were having a problem with attrition. We had a lot of employees leaving the county. We were not competitive in our wages and our health benefits. We made a conscious decision to pay our employees a more competitive wage because we were losing people, and Sheriff Schrader and our District Attorney, Pete Ware, will talk about the challenges. As a result of that and other costs related to providing government services, we have had to spend into our fund balance for the last several years in order to balance our budget. Our savings account has gone down to a point where we don't want to dip into our savings anymore. The county does have sufficient funds to meet the recommendations of the GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association. We are keeping $28 million in our fund balance, which is recommended, but we can't spend into it anymore to keep good financial position. So we are asking the voters to consider allowing us to keep more of the funds we're allowed to under our authorized mill levy. Currently, the county has authorized 21 mills approximately for its general fund. For the last several years, we have been collecting money, but we are only allowed to keep 18 mills based upon the Tabor formula. So we have been doing a rebate to the taxpayers. Now, some of you may have been thinking, I don't recall getting a rebate check from Jefferson County. Well, that's because we haven't sent rebate checks. To be fiscally responsible, we have been lowering the mill levy because it would cost us about $200,000 to send everyone a check. So we've lowered the mill levy down to around 18 mills. And that just isn't enough money to keep us to where our levels of service need to be. So we're looking at a $16 million reduction from our base budget this year. And those cuts will affect operations. And so we're asking the voters to consider, are you willing to allow Jefferson County to keep more of that authorized mill levy? We have restrictions. The property tax portion will sunset in 7 years. The first year we'll only keep the $16.1 million that the budget shortfall is, but in future years we'll set the budget where we think it is appropriate. But we understand that this is an impact to the taxpayers. It'll increase their property taxes by about, on average, about $450 for an average price house per month for the first year. So we ask your support in 1A.
Thank you. Sheriff, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, councilors. Thank you for the opportunity to speak briefly. As the Jefferson County Sheriff, I'm absolutely clear about what my role is, and that's to keep people safe, and I work daily at doing that. I'm also absolutely clear about the proper role of government, and that's to keep our communities safe. In the Jefferson County Jail, 40% of the people who are lodged there result from arrests that initiate by a Lakewood police agent. 40%. I've spoke to the council before about the challenges that we are going to have regarding the budget. Commissioner Ty has outlined some of that to you. And the fact is I'm going to have to reduce beds in the county jail to stay within budget guidelines. And when I do that, the jail population is going to have to reduce. And it is logical to conclude that if 40% of the people who are in the jail came from the city of Lakewood, the reductions in the population will result in 40% of those people returning to the city of Lakewood. That's going to be achieved in two different ways. One, there's a chief judge order that permits me, when there's overcrowding conditions, to cut sentences in half. I don't want to have to use it, but I will have to use that for all range of crimes. It does not, the chief judge order does not distinguish the nature of the crime. Whether they're sentenced to jail is the only factor. And at 50% of sentence, we will have to conduct releases. And when we do that, we will only get half of where we need to go for 2020. And as I've outlined to council previously, there are two cuts, one at the beginning of 2020 and one in 14 months at the beginning of 2021. The other method is to refuse to accept people into the county jail. So unless there is required by statute an advisement from a judge for a crime, there will be policy that will be put in place, and agents from the Lakewood Police Department will not be permitted to bring people into the county jail. And I want to make sure, there was a question that came up about the difference between violent crimes and nonviolent crimes. Violent crimes typically would require that advisement by a judge, but nonviolent crimes would not necessarily. But to be clear, those nonviolent crimes are in some instances crimes against people. They are also multiple DUI offenders. So I'm asking that when you consider later a resolution, that you vote yes. When you do that, you will be protecting your people. You will be giving your police agents opportunity to do their job fully. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Sheriff. Mr. Weir? Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'm Pete Weir, your district attorney. I'm here also in support of 1A. And my support is just based on the realities in my office. For the last few years, we have seen the real life impact of the budget challenges that have faced the county. And I'm seeing it now with respect to recruitment and retention of critical individuals. On Wednesday, I met with a young deputy district attorney, and I spoke with her, and it was a mixture of her being thrilled and terrified, because I said, you know what, Madeline, congratulations, you're being promoted to district court. That means that she's going to start handling the most serious cases in my office, felony cases. But a look of terror came over her face, thinking, am I ready? She said, you know what, Pete? Today's a special day for me because it's my anniversary. A year ago today, I passed the bar. So she's gone from being a brand new lawyer to working felony cases in 1 year. Not ideal. Fortunately, we have some strong leaders within the office that are going to be able to coach and mentor her. But I'm being faced with recruiting and retention issues as a result of the budget situation that I face. I made a pledge to the citizens when I got elected that I was going to pay particular attention to our most vulnerable citizens, the elderly, our senior citizens, and our children. And I regret to say at this point that I've had to cut my elder abuse unit in half, and I've had to reduce my crimes against children unit by 40%. I've had to take my prosecutor out of Ralston House, who is embedded at Ralston House, to assist with the forensic interviews of children who have been abused and subjected to sexual assaults. I've lost 4 investigators that are so critical to being able to assist local law enforcement with their investigations and presentations of cases. In 2017, my office filed about 4,060 felony cases. In 2018, we filed 5,002. The caseload is increasing. My staff is decreasing, and it's an increasing challenge to be able to recruit and retain individuals. But it's not all doom and gloom. You've got remarkable people working on your behalf in the district attorney's office. But I'd be remiss if I were not here today encouraging and asking you to support 1A, because they deserve it. They deserve the resources to do the job the way in which this community expects the job to be done. And I'd be remiss not to be here urging support of 1A on behalf of the people of Lakewood and the people of Jefferson County. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Mace, and I have Matt Boyles, and then Sandra Griswold. Forgive me if I pronounce that wrong. Good evening, sir. It's been a while.
Months. Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. I'm here tonight on behalf of all the citizens of Lakewood. I'm here to talk to you about JeffCom and JeffCom Dispatch on the Lakewood side of things. And I want to know one thing. Why is 99.9% of the Lakewood JeffCom part of dispatch? Why are we dealing with new dispatchers when the way it used to be, Lakewood had their own dispatch? Okay? And I know council approved it for JeffCom to be approved between the sheriff and Lakewood. Okay? I'm wondering why it's taking the police department 10 times longer to respond to calls and the fire department 10 minutes longer when I've got Station 1 5 minutes away from me. Okay, not even 5 minutes away from me for medical calls. Okay, but the police department, it's taking them 45 minutes to get to one call. 45 minutes, Mayor. This is crazy. And I've spoken to several sergeants, several people, and they've said there's hiccups in dispatch. I'm asking Lakewood to please do a study session because this is very important to citizen safety and to agents' safety. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Matt Boyles. Then Senda. And we. Okay, thank you. Good evening.
All right, perfect. Good evening. Thank you for your time. I think you'll be pleased to know that I'm the only one here tonight. Model rockets have been launched for 30 years in Bear Creek Lake Park. It's been a safe, lawful activity that has helped thousands of people around the metro area. I represent an organization who volunteers to help people launch safely, including school groups and enthusiasts. Now, with no change to city ordinance, we are told that model rockets are such a problem we can't exist anymore unless we successfully negotiate with people who can unofficially rewrite policy at will. Park staff has changed classification of model rockets to dangerous missiles, changed the multi-use policy of our parks, established a passive pursuits policy in our parks, changed historical precedent of 30 years of use, and not honoring a city-designated launch area. These are policy changes that are inappropriate for staff to be making. The simplest long-term solution is to add an ordinance that clearly states that model rocket use is permitted, as it has been for 30 years at Bear Creek Lake Park. Otherwise, you will need to add ordinances and new definitions for all these proposed changes. For example, are motorboats a passive pursuit? Baseball meets the classification of a dangerous missile, so are we eliminating Little League in our parks? Policy change is the responsibility of the City Council. It may seem the easiest road is to tell us to negotiate policy with staff, but can you imagine having to do a study session to define passive pursuit? Don't give away your right and the citizens' right to decide policy. Add one ordinance for model rockets so we don't have to add 5 ordinances for all of the staff's proposed changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Trish, and you're going to be speaking on behalf of Jill and Kelly and Charles. And then after Trish, we have Jean Marie, and then Virginia. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening, Mayor and councilors. Thank you very much for allowing me time to speak at public comment. My name is Trish Merkel, and I live at 241 Pierce Street in Ward 2. I'm president of the O'Kane Park Neighborhood Association, and I'm here speaking on behalf of the board of directors of the O'Kane neighborhood. I'm here with fellow board members Jill Bossard and Kelly Taylor, and speaking time granted from members of the Two Creeks Neighborhood Organization. I would like to start by thanking the City of Lakewood for providing resources for residents to build community through neighborhood organizations. Specifically, I would like to thank our city manager, Kathy Hodgson. Thank you. And her staff of city planners, particularly Holly Bohm, who has supported the neighborhoods for years. We appreciate them, and Holly will certainly be missed. For those of you that do not know, there are 26 neighborhood associations registered with the City of Lakewood. These are not HOAs. The purpose of neighborhood associations is to build community. The mission of the O'Kane Park Neighborhood Association is to enhance our sense of community and maintain a safe, fun, and friendly neighborhood. I'm sure that other neighborhood associations fulfill similar missions through community meetings, annual picnics, national night out parties, grant funding, supporting local businesses and artists, and neighborhood watch programs, to name a few. And all of this is done in an inclusive and non-political way. Well, with all of this in mind, you can imagine how dismayed I was to receive a letter from Save Lakewood. Save Lakewood was the stamp on the return address, and it was the only identifying information on this communication. Looking into it, Save Lakewood is registered with the city as an organization, and formal council person Dave Wickman is the registered agent. So I can only assume that this letter came from him or with his knowledge with no other information. The letter reads, "Come one, come all to the intersection of West Alameda and 12900 West Ohio Avenue and turn onto West Ohio. Come and see your city government in action. Come and see how the city has allowed a developer to come into an established neighborhood and build approximately 6 or more foot walls and 3- and 4-story multifamily buildings on top of them, right in the middle of a residential area. These structures will house hundreds of people and dramatically increase the vehicular traffic in this once peaceful, neighborly environment of the Green Mountain townhouses and the single-family homes on South Alkier Street, located directly behind these monstrous buildings. Apparently, it does not matter if the property values of the citizens are affected, if the sun does not reach the homes of the people living on South Alkier and Ohio streets, or if their pleasant views are destroyed. It does not matter that these neighborhoods will no longer be safe because the increased population will undoubtedly result in increased crime. The city must satisfy its own needs and those of the developer at the expense of its citizens. Come and see how your city government disrespects and disregards the wishes of its tax-paying citizens in favor of developers. Prior to the developer building these structures, the citizens were very vocal and made it clear what they thought would fit into the area. Sadly, they were ignored by Lakewood city officials. Come and see how the city does not even endeavor to require developers to build structures consistent with the architecture and height of the existing homes in the area, or even designated to fit nicely into the area. With elections coming up in this November, get to know the candidates, talk to them, go online and learn what their positions are, attend debates, if any, before making up your mind and casting your vote. Post and/or make copies and distribute this flyer to people in your communities so that they too may be aware that long-standing, established, peaceful neighborhoods are forever being changed in favor of urbanization. I received this letter as the president of my neighborhood organization, and I checked with other neighborhood leaders to see if they also received this, and yes, they did. So this letter is insulting and an affront to everything that we've worked so hard to accomplish with our neighborhood associations. We are there to build a sense of community and not to use scare tactics and slanderous remarks to divide us. And to imagine that this comes from a group that's led by a former council person and a current neighborhood leader. Dave Wickman is registered as the representative of Ward 4 Coalition Neighborhood Association. What is even more insulting is additional information about this group. I took a look at the Save Lakewood Facebook page and saw multiple posts directly attacking the mayor and scare tactics that are focusing on crime. One comment on a recent post suggests that a person of color should be publicly hanged. Although weeks have passed, the Save Lakewood Facebook page administrator has not deleted this racist comment about publicly lynching. It is deplorable. Looking slightly deeper, there's also a Save Our Lakewood Facebook page that posts identical information as the Save Lakewood Facebook page. This page, in turn, posts information identical to things seen on the lakewoodpolls.org website, which then in turn has information, wording, and graphics that are identical to items found in the Lakewood Watchdog. It is unacceptable that these groups, Save Lakewood, Save Our Lakewood, Lakewood Polls, and the Lakewood Watchdog, are reaching out to neighborhood organizations to spread their divisive rhetoric. I challenge all candidates for this November election to refuse to benefit, either directly through campaign contributions from anyone associated with these groups, or indirectly through endorsements on Facebook, websites, or within the Watchdog. The scare tactics and divisive rhetoric has no place in Lakewood and threatens the fabric of our inclusive community. Thank you.
Thank you. Virginia? I'm sorry. Virginia, you're after, forgive me. You're after Jean Marie. And then Kathy Kentner. Good evening.
Good evening. Jean Marie, 1015 Carson, 1015 J Street, Two Creeks neighborhood, and that's what I have come to speak of. I have come to the city of Lakewood to make people aware of how the city council of the last 16 years has developed my neighborhood. We're an old neighborhood, and we are usually single-family dwellings with some apartment complexes, not too big. Well, currently, in the last 5-6 years, we have had 589 apartments moved into our neighborhood, and some of those are 4 stories high. They don't look like our neighborhood, the old, unique neighborhood that we are. We have 182 condos, which will be owner occupied, and they are costing over $400,000, and they are 1,200 square feet, and they're 12 feet wide. So there's 589 apartments currently, and there is more to come. At 13th and Harlan, on the north and south side of the light rail, I have it from a very good, reliable employee, that those 2 spots are being rushed to be developed, to be approved, I should say, through the planning department, so that they can start building before December happens. And I find that highly inappropriate. And what has happened to my neighborhood, which has not encouraged community or been like my community, I am very discouraged by what the Two Creek Neighborhood Organization continues to do. to Two Creeks. I have been associated with them for 25 years and wondered why are these people who are on the Two Creeks Neighborhood Organization being so schmoozed over the last 25 years. I've lived there 25 years, and they've been fawned on. And I can only guess that that makes them feel good. I don't know any other reason. So I do have great concern that the city continues to mow down my neighborhood. I just have to ask you, are you concerned? Do you care? Do you have any empathy, or have you no shame for how this neighborhood has been decimated by the plans of the city? There's a lot more history to it, but I don't have time to do that. And I would ask you to consider, where is the water for all this building that's going on? While the developers go and...
Your time's up.
Yep. While the developers go on to the bank, the new news is that the citizens will have to pay for the inadequate water on the Front Range. Thank you.
Thank you. Virginia? And then Kathy? And then Jerry, and then Lenore. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Virginia Wilkins, and I think my address is on record, and I'm back once again about the use of the Bear Creek Shared Path. I live very close to this path and have walked, skated, and biked it for more than 27 years. I think I have more than enough experience to address some serious issues along the path. I've tried to get your attention about these issues for several years now, although I think the first time I addressed this council, I was warned that I was up against a large bike lobby. A truer statement was probably never made. But I did invite each and all of you to join me down on that path to see what happens on that trail. None of you did. I still fail to see why bikers are allowed to rule the Bear Creek Trail. So I decided to go with an open mind to collect data about what I witnessed along the trail at several points, from Wadsworth to Fox Hollow Golf Course at different times of the day, different days of the week, between July 26th and September 26th. I spoke with and listened to a whole lot of people, nearly all of whom approached me to ask what I was doing. A tally, I said. If they asked for more, I was happy to answer. I am here for your safety. Many had complaints. I offered all the name and phone number of the mayor's office so that they could make their statements without any bias from me. I have no idea how many followed up. Although I began to add interesting things to my count over the weeks, I will give you only rough totals. I tallied for 37 days and more than 70 hours. I spoke with 178 people for more than 5 minutes. I counted 2,866 pedestrians, 4,238 bikes, a disappointing 188 kids, and 876 dogs. All but 5 were on a leash. I was very impressed with the dog walkers. I collected a lot more information and suggestions and comments from both bikers and walkers. Yes, some of it's unprintable. I have a list of common complaints made by both, too much for here and now. My question is, where is the plan for the safety of the kids, the seniors, and the handicapped along this trail? They are people too. I understand that the City of Lakewood has recently received money to upgrade this trail. I was told just this evening that adding a crusher fines trail next to the paved concrete trail. That's all I know. I certainly hope that this time it will give these kids, seniors, and handicapped at least equal say in these plans. Will it be plowed as promptly in winter as the concrete? Will its ice and potholes be dealt with in a timely manner? Will strollers, wheeled walkers, and wheelchairs and slower walking seniors be able to use it easily if they're forced onto the Crusher Fines Trail? My personal preference
Wrap
is
it up,
that,
please. Thank you.
thank you, is that bikers be relegated to using only it, since speed limits are currently a joke. That might keep their speed down. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Kathy, and then Jerry, and then Lenore, and if you have not had a chance to speak and you wish to, please come and see Michelle. Good evening.
Good evening, Council. Our recent campaign finance ordinance is intended for transparency and to keep big money out of our elections. Mr. Mayor, your contribution reports, but real estate and development money is showing up in our council and mayoral campaigns. Mr. Mayor, your contribution reports read like a staff directory of development, lobbying, real estate, and law firms. You have accepted donations from people who represent clients with issues coming before this council. And a week ago, independent expenditure committees were formed at the 11th hour in an apparent attempt to raise and spend special interest money with no public accountability until well after many people have returned completed ballots, possibly representing votes that will be cast without full disclosure of the source of the candidate's support. In the spirit of our new campaign finance ordinance that is intended for transparency and to keep your big money out of our elections, those of you candidates who are supported by these independent expenditure committees, 2 of you who sit up there tonight, should disavow their message and demand that they immediately report all contributions and expenditures and fold up their circus tents and leave our city. On a separate but related matter, I am once again asking you to take action to honor the results of this summer's election. We now have evidence as to what the formal procedure has always been for building permit application, and evidence that several projects totaling several hundred residential units applied for their building permits without following this formal process. On July 15th, this council stated that the language regarding clarification was not ready for prime time, and Councillor Skilling stated that a week or 3 weeks wouldn't make a difference. But it has now been 3 months without this clarification showing up on an agenda, and the delay is making a difference. Projects are starting to be granted building permits without required allocations and without required hearings and approval from you, City Council. Pinning your hopes on a change in council is as risky and unproductive as pinning hopes on a meritless lawsuit to deny us our right to vote. And it is wrong to continue to deny the express demand of the voters of this great city of Lakewood. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great evening. Jerry? Good evening.
Good evening. I'm here to talk about item 13 tonight, and it states that City Council requests to restore definition regarding student living units. 2 pieces of legislation were introduced and enacted by the Lakewood Municipal Authority in 2002 and 2003. It clarified the question, should colleges and universities be permitted to own and operate properties inside of residentially zoned classifications? The introduced legislation was passed successfully, and subsequently 8 properties in violation divested from the residential zoning. It was a win-win solution that offered protection to the integrity of Lakewood's residential neighborhoods, and it gave clarification to Colorado Christian University, who went on to improve their own zoning, establishing a planned development where they were granted favorable tax status. In 2012, the zoning rewrite words from the legislation enacted disappeared with no public record of intention to change the legislation. Yet, according to our planning department, this absence of words from the zoning code has left a murky confusion to the question: should colleges and universities be permitted to operate properties inside of our residentially zoned classifications? For the past 3 years, various citizens have asked for the help of this council to acknowledge the neighborhood zoning legislation as it was intended. We ask in multiple forms of communication that the murkiness created from the omission of words in the 2012 rewrite be addressed. An ad hoc committee was formed, and this issue was discussed during the July 9th meeting. A study session was to be the next step. That was 3 months ago, and nothing has been scheduled. I request today that a special study session be set up as soon as possible. October the 28th, which is next week, looks to be a possibility prior to your regularly scheduled council meeting. Elections are upon us, and a new council will be seated soon. Will this council please step up and complete what was presented to you, each of you, in multiple communications, in multiple and various ways over the past 3 years, and complete it?
Thank you. Lenore? And Lenore is the last one that signed up, so if anybody else wishes to speak, please come and see the clerk. Good evening.
Good evening. I'd like to first comment on Jerry's statement and say I too encourage you to set up a special study session on October 28th, if possible. And the urgency in part is because of the delay of at least 3 years on this issue in clarifying the wording of the zoning ordinance. We are back to square one. The residents are back to where we can be kicked out and students or faculty placed in our homes. So I ask you, this is the urgency and why we're pushing for a quick response. Now I'm going to shift gears. Transparency in elections was a key point stressed during the campaign finance reform meetings. I recently learned about IECs. I hadn't heard of them before, the Independent Expenditure Committees, which are a legal way to raise funds. On October 8th, Mark Borman, a broker and real estate developer, registered 4 IECs. The first, Lakewood for a Better Environment, to support Stain to Gut wine. The second, Lakewood Neighbors for Open Space, supports Henry Hollander. The third, Protect Lakewood Parks and Open Space, supports the mayor. And the fourth, Save the Foothills, supports Kira DeGrew. All 4 of the candidates opposed the Strategic Growth Initiative, although the names of these IECs don't really reflect that sentiment. Because these IECs were registered on October 8th, only one financial statement will be available for public scrutiny, and this is a week before the election. Many voters will have already filled out their ballots. I feel the citizens of Lakewood are tired of deceptive practices and special interests attempting to influence the outcome of the ballot box. A lesson to be learned from the July special election is that more money doesn't guarantee a victory at the polls. A quick way to educate ourselves is to click on lakewood.org and then proceed to campaign reports and forms. We can ensure greater transparency by doing our homework and demanding that our leaders do the same. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Anybody else? All right, I'll close public comment. Councilor Skilling, you want to say something quickly, please?
I just want to address the CCU issue. We did have the July 9th ad hoc committee meeting. The study session for that is scheduled currently for December 2nd. That's when it's scheduled. Between now and then, I believe, other than the 28th, that is the first available study session. November having almost no meetings at all. I believe one, and none of those are study sessions. So December 2nd was the first one that we could find a slot for it. And so it has been scheduled as of, I believe, a week ago. And that was my fault that didn't get scheduled a little bit sooner. I kind of let that fall between the cracks. So.
Okay, well, right. So let's not have, we appreciate your comment. Councilor Skilling, thank you very much. And we'll move on to the executive report. Ms. Hodson.
Thank you. Just a couple of things. So the Veterans Fair, the 7th annual Veterans Fair, was held on September 24th. And I want to give you a few statistics about that particular event. There were 54 exhibitors and over 300 veterans that participated. There were 50 no-cost flu shots were provided by the Department of Veterans Affairs, Eastern Colorado Healthcare Systems. 37 no-cost health screenings were provided by Inner City Health. 41 no-cost hepatitis C tests were provided by Liver Connection Colorado. And most importantly, over 600 hamburgers and hot dogs were served at the cookout. It was a really successful event, and I want to personally thank the staff leader, who is Corey Peterson, who you will hear from later, and the dedicated staff teams for working so hard on this veterans event. Additionally, Cider Days was last weekend, and we had, over the 2-day attendance, we had approximately 15,000 people in attendance, and that was one of the largest turnouts ever. So congratulations to the staff. Very recently, we opened the new 50th art exhibit at Addenbrook on Saturday to a pretty good sized crowd, and it's very beautiful. Please make sure to go to Addenbrook and experience that. That'll soothe your soul. Okay, I think I mentioned this to you in an email, but I want to say it publicly. Our Human Resource Director, Jeff Dolan, has left the city, and I have appointed Corey Peterson, again, who you'll meet in a little bit, as the acting HR director. And so far, things are looking pretty good. So thank you to Corey for this heavy lift. And last week, you had a study session on crime in Lakewood, and we had committed to some communication outcomes as a result of your request. So I'd like to go through those. Staff has been working diligently on some of these. I want to report this out. So let's see. So first of all, there will be a reminder/campaign to get people to report crimes such as shots fired. So we're making a real effort to encourage people to please report when you hear these shots, not just on Nextdoor, but call the police department, please, so that we have record and we can look into it. On our website, there's a more prominent area that's a button on the front page titled, on lakewood.org, titled Submit a Non-Emergency Police Report. So that'll be, again, in a more prominent place so that it's really easy if you hear shots or you suspect something. Please go to that site, as long as this isn't an emergency. Always, when there's an emergency, always contact 911. In addition, we're now posting crime preventative tips and safety messages. So the police department is posting this kind of information on Nextdoor, starting with a scam alert just last week. John Romero, our fearless PIO in the police department, also plans to issue press releases highlighting crime prevention tips. And we will cite those on the website's newsroom to appear on the front page of lakewood.org. So all of this will create a higher profile so that people can be more engaged and can know how to stay safe and how to report these kinds of incidences. Staff is working at creating a magnetic refrigeration card with non-emergency numbers. And they did this pretty quickly. It's only going to cost about $200 to $300, so we thought that was a pretty small investment for a pretty good little reminder that people can put on their refrigerators. And finally, we're creating handouts promoting the Neighborhood Watch program, including the registration form. So those will be available to you that you can hand out at your ward meetings. There's a lot going on in the city. And in an effort to be brief, I'll conclude there. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice work. Great follow-up and much appreciated. So will the clerk please read item 7?
Item 7, first public hearing, ordinance O-2019-38, adopting a revised budget for the year 2019 for the city of Lakewood, Colorado, and further adopting the annual budget for the city for the fiscal year beginning on the first day of January 2019 and ending on December 31, 2019, estimating the amount of money necessary to be raised by levying taxes for the year of 2019 to defray the costs of municipal government of the city of Lakewood, Colorado for the fiscal year beginning January 1, 2020 and ending December 31, 2020, and estimating the amount of money to be derived from other revenue sources, setting forth the appropriations for each fund.
Thank you, and I'll turn it over to our finance director here in a moment, Mr. Dorr, but I will remind, and this might be in your presentation, but this is unique in that we have 2 public hearings for the budget. This will be the first. We'll have public comment, and then we'll have a final one coming up in a couple weeks. Sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of City Council. Once again, my name is Larry Dorr, City of Lakewood Finance Director and City Treasurer. And thank you, Madam Clerk, for reading in the title of tonight's ordinance. I know that that can be a little bit distracting in kicking this off. Well, this is the 50th anniversary of the history of the city's incorporation, and this is the 50th budget of the City of Lakewood, and it is no less interesting than all of the other budgets that have come before it. And at council's study session in September, I gave an opportunity for us all to reflect on the history of the city and its finances and how things have changed and how things probably will change in the next 50 years. And I would invite anybody who's watching tonight who maybe is interested in the city's budget to look back on that study session in September for more information and more details. Tonight, I'll just be providing a very brief overview and just a little bit of new information for Mayor and Council and the audience tonight on year-to-date finances. So I will keep my comments far more brief than the September study session, but I will also give a little bit of an update. And as the Mayor pointed out, this is a public hearing. This is one of the few city ordinances that requires 2 public hearings because of the importance, because of all of the resources and taxpayer funds that go into the budget. The public will have a chance to speak after my PowerPoint show, and we will answer questions, have discussion, and hopefully move this budget forward for a publication and a second hearing later on this month and an adoption. I'm joined tonight by all of my colleagues. Our department heads across the city will be available to answer any questions you may have, and we will go as far as we need to go with either questions here on site or in follow-ups. Council's had its budget since early September, since the first week of September, so about 6 weeks that this has been posted on lakewood.org, and we have an opportunity to get feedback from the public and bring those to the public domain tonight and to chambers for questions, comments, discussion, amendment, whatever the case may be. So without further ado, let me just give a little background on some of the more public events that have occurred. First, the city has a budget and audit board. Not everybody might be aware of that. And in fact, the council, a budget and audit board met again tonight and discussed its regular business and planned for its future meetings. The budget and audit board is made up of 3 council members, Beta, Harrison, and LeBure, and 3 citizens, Dave Wickman, Donald Tallman, and John Ludwigson. So this 6-member board meets to review the projections in the budget, the financial results year to date, and to receive the city's annual financial audit from an independent CPA firm. So this budget was previewed for that board on August 19th. I mentioned the September 16th study session, which can be rewatched on lakewood.org. And that, of course, provided many more details, much more dynamic questions and answers and discussion. And then tonight, our first of 2 public hearings, and next steps being the adoption and second public hearing on October 28th. The idea of having the schedule spread across the 3 months in the public domain gives the public the opportunity to make comments and give feedback. But do know that the city's staff is working for months in advance of that to prepare the annual draft budget. And you'll get a sense for that, obviously, even if you just read the city manager's budget message in the document, you get a feel for that, or if you flip through some of the pages online. So in communicating the city's budget to the community, a lot of the focus tends toward what's new in the budget, what's new and exciting coming to the community, how should I see changes perhaps in the neighborhood or in the business area in which I work. And yet I've got to start with a few more details to get to that point so that you can know where does the money come from, how is it spent, and how are these decisions made. And first, 2/3 of the city's income can be spent on the services that we all see every day in traveling throughout the community. And at the end of the day, the city is really in 3 businesses. Obviously, public safety, which has been discussed, and that's not just the police department, but also our municipal courts and other activities that create public safety in the Lakewood community. Of course, we're in transportation and public works and all the roadways, sidewalks, bike paths, multi-use paths, all of the transportation activities, snow plowing, and all of those things. And then our third major business is obviously parks and recreation and all of the open space, the maintenance of the open space and operations and activities therein. Those are primarily in our general fund, and that's where we're going to concentrate the discussion. And before we start talking about what's new, we need to talk a little bit about where does the money come from and what is the outlook for those funds and how much have we got to work with. And the general fund, you'll see, the city of Lakewood, a little bit different than the county you heard about earlier, a little bit different than state government and federal government. The city's income and the way that we provide services is driven by sales tax. This is the lion's share of the city's income, and I want to make sure that the public has a really keen understanding of the sales tax and how it works and what they're paying for. When you purchase something in Lakewood, either by receiving it at your home through delivery or by visiting one of our Lakewood businesses, and you purchase something, for every dollar spent, a 7.5% sales tax will be assessed and collected by whoever is selling you that particular good. Yet, only 3% of the 7.5% sales tax is due to the city of Lakewood. The balance goes to these other agencies, the state of Colorado, Jefferson County, and the Regional Transportation District and Scientific and Cultural Facilities District. So those agencies also share in the sales tax. So hopefully this gives folks a much better idea of where's the money coming from, first, that provides for services. Second, every property owner in Lakewood is aware of their property tax bill. We heard a little bit about it already tonight from some of our public comment visitors. For the average residents in Lakewood at about $350,000, this is what a property tax bill would look like. Now, I've left off some of the special districts, water, sanitation, et cetera, because those vary across the different neighborhoods in Lakewood, but these 4 are the majors. And as you can see, the school district comprises the majority of the property tax bill. Second to the county, the fire district, and then you see the city at about 5% of the total bill. So while the city does collect property tax, it's really the 3rd largest source of income to our general activities, which you saw on the pie chart just a moment ago. I want to be sure and mention this because sometimes that's not clear to folks which part of their property tax is coming to the city and which services are provided. So in preparing the budget, we want to forecast what's going on in property taxes, sales taxes, and what trends are occurring there. And if you're interested in more detail about that, I would guide anybody in the audience to go to the presentation on September 16th because Shopping patterns are changing. Consumption is changing. The types of things that we are all buying is evolving all the time. We're purchasing things with our mobile phones. We're having things delivered when we used to go to physical brick and mortar locations. And that suggests a change in the consumer economy and in our behaviors, in our consumption behaviors. And that too could drive revenues to the city and the way that we provide services. So in preparing for the budget and forecasting where the money comes from and what those priorities are, we first want to check out how are things going this year to date. And Mayor and Council, this is the updated information. I shared this with the Budget and Audit Board about an hour or two ago, so apologies to you three council members who were there. But this September year to date includes new information since the study session in mid-September. We closed the books in the month of September, and here's the latest information. Sales tax revenues have increased about 1.48%, or $611,137, and that's a slower rate of growth than the city has experienced in many years prior. So that's contributing to this conversation that we're having around consumer demographics and consumer behaviors. Property taxes, we were expecting them to come in pretty much at a zero change from the prior year. As you know, property tax revenues are collected in arrears. So today we're collecting the 2018 property taxes. And yet your property values are only reassessed by the county assessor every 2 years. So we would anticipate to see growth in next year's budget, and we're forecasting that. But this year to date, relatively unchanged. Building use tax. It has decreased 47%. We anticipated that, and you'll recall in the first quarter of 2018, there were large collections due to the hailstorms that occurred in Lakewood, and not surprising there. All three of these line items are right on pace with the budget that was presented in early September. These trends haven't changed really at all. And yet, it's worth confirming that in a revenue update. Last motor vehicle use tax, we are once again seeing that motor vehicle use tax is going to have a record year for Lakewood, and it's in a lot of different areas. It's used vehicles, new vehicles, and non-traditional vehicles, RVs, watercraft, a lot of different types of vehicles are making up this increase. I do want to say that I recently have seen some of the data surrounding new vehicle sales and used vehicle sales, I should say, and that is that consumer financing in this particular segment of the economy is a bit concerning. It's believed by many that the majority of this increase in sales is coming through additional household debt. In other words, people are borrowing more and more money all of the time for new vehicles, as opposed to having larger down payments or shorter payment terms and things like this. So this is an area for us to keep an eye on. A couple of stats that I saw related to that is that 25% of new vehicle loans are 6 years or greater. That's a change from the past when vehicle loans were 5 years or less. In addition, a third of vehicle loans now have additional debt from previously owned vehicles. What that means is the trade-in isn't necessarily paid off. Rather, the trade-in has money owed. And in fact, it has money owed in excess of the value of the trade-in. So it's a fascinating bit of data on that and where the trends are going. So on the one hand, I think there are many buyers of new vehicles who have the income and the equity and the cash to do that because the vehicles are more and more dynamic. Yet there are obviously a number of folks buying these vehicles who are extending debt or taking on more debt. So it's something for us to continue to watch. But in the meantime, this revenue is very strong. Total revenue has just decreased $29,472. I have to put that to the exact dollar because that's on nearly $90 million collected through September year to date. So it's a very small differential from one year to the next, and is in keeping with what we're expecting in our current budget. On the expense side, since I'm already here year to date, now I know I've been talking about where does the money come from, but I just want to get these 3 bullet points in. First, total expenditures have increased 4%. We anticipated that. It's budgeted for primarily. That is in our police expenditures, 4.33% or 1.7 million. And then last but not least, I always am reporting on our number of vacancies for a couple of reasons. One, it impacts the service delivery to the community, so we want to be checking on that. I know that our interim HR director is very focused on that. He and I were just talking about it earlier today. So it impacts the service delivery. At the same time, it impacts the finances because obviously that's a payroll cash item that money is being saved due to those vacancies. So we watch both sides of that equation as we do our business. So as you can see, there's a mix of results, I think, in these financial numbers. And I think that as we look across the Lakewood economy, it's the next thing we do in forecasting. As we look across the Lakewood economy, we see a mix of activities. First, in the upper left, you see this Spring Hill Suites Marriott that's open now at the Colorado Mills, which means a couple of things. First of all, building construction use tax from all the construction materials that went into that huge investment for the owners, that contributed to the city's income. Yet also, it's believed that it will drive a lot of foot traffic at the Colorado Mills, which creates more economic activity, greater number of jobs, and hopefully more sales tax revenue. So that's one end of the spectrum. On the other end of the spectrum, on the right here, you see at South Wadsworth in the Grant Ranch neighborhood, the former Babies R Us, which is closed. And that doesn't feel good. That's sort of the other end of the spectrum. And this is a company that in total has liquidated. It wasn't as though this location wasn't great or, there's just some other force at play, but the company just struggled, frankly, to keep up with online sales as a competition. And so no longer there. But more reasons to feel optimistic. You see manufacturing and warehouse space, which is unusual, really, for the Lakewood community. This is pretty exceptional. You see that this is at the Sheridan and 6th Avenue corridor, and this picture is now about 5-6 weeks old, somewhere in there, and the construction marches on. And I just love to see the progress of the construction work and activity going on here at this particular site. So a mix of activities as to where does the money come from. Where does it go? The city is a services organization. People, workers, provide service in our community. We spend 3/4 of every dollar on personnel services. We invest quite a lot, which is why our city manager just described our new interim HR director as so critical to the organization, because we are a personnel-driven organization. In fact, if you look at the line items in our services and supplies budget, that 25.4%, most of those services and supplies are things used by the personnel. For example, gasoline in our patrol cars that patrol our communities, the gasoline and diesel fuel in our snow plows that provide those services in the community. So that as a backdrop, now I'm going to get into the new stuff for 2020. First, we have a position in our planning department, sustainability planner. And there has been much discussed about this in the past. And so for more information, obviously that's been available for a good period of time related to the sustainability plan. In our police department, we are adding our community action team sergeant and our technology sergeant. Our police chief, Dan McCaskey, talked about this in greater detail at the council study session, so I won't belabor that, but that is also new. As are these 2 new positions in the police department, homeless navigator. And, I appreciate that could be a new concept for the community. And I'll tell you, the chief describes it best at the study session, but I'll say that these are workers, city employees, that will work closely with our community action team in order to impact the issue of people without homes in the Lakewood community. And so this is a countywide coordinated program. because we know that if enforcement or programming is strong in Lakewood, it just moves that population to Wheat Ridge, or if it's strong in Wheat Ridge, it just moves that population to Lakewood and so on. So it is a countywide coordinated effort. In addition, I want to talk just a little bit about police staffing, and I've talked about some of the new positions, but I really want to talk about new investments and spending in this 2020 budget related to police staffing. We have 15 new police agents in field training as we speak, and we are expecting them to be in the agent population in November. So that'll be 15 new agents into the community immediately beginning in November, and that's a really exciting landmark, and it just goes with our police academies that are happening twice a year and those folks moving through the process. Bringing new police agents takes time, and it takes a big investment, both to attract interest from candidates, to go through the whole application process, background screening, and then of course a police academy, and then ultimately field training. This is where agents are out with a field training officer on the job as it was. So 15 new agents in field training. We also have 28 recruits in our police academy, and I happened to be driving by there the other day. There's really hardly anywhere to park in that at that space over there because the police academy is so active and busy. We have 28 personnel there, and they will become police agents next year. So 15 plus 28. I'll let you add this up. And then in this budget, this 2020 budget, we are budgeting for 24 recruits in 2 academies. We typically would do that in 2 academies, not only so that the police department can handle that influx of numbers, because 28 in our current academy is the largest police academy in the history of Lakewood by a pretty good margin. As you would expect, given those new numbers coming on, this budget has 2019 spending in the police department increasing 7.7% and 10.4% respectively. Now, I mentioned in my earlier comments that the police department is tracking just a little bit below 4% year to date, and that's because our current police academy, they just went onto the payroll in late July, so those numbers will start to get reflected closer to this 7% during the fourth quarter of 2019. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about that. I will now just briefly cover what my colleagues, Chief McCaskey, Public Works Director Jay Hutchison, and Community Resources Director Kit Newland covered at our budget study session. So I'd invite any of you in the audience curious about any one of these initiatives to check out the video from September 16th, because you'll have a lot more detail. And now I will also ask my colleagues for a little levity in allowing me to describe their very important projects that they will be leading for this community. First, in our police department, and these are some new things, we will be purchasing police agent hazmat equipment, and Chief McCaskey described this related to the new threats that are out there in the world in this day and age, and we'll be purchasing that equipment in our 2020 budget. Also, we're going to bring handheld metal detectors and a new x-ray machine to our municipal court. I'll show you a picture of that here in a minute. And then it's time for another upgrade somewhat related to technology, and that is related to the interview rooms that are in our police station as we're interviewing crime suspects and so forth, so that we can properly catalog all of the information gained. This is a shot of our current lobby metal detector and x-ray machine. It dates to early last decade, and it's outdated. It's quite expensive to repair when it can be repaired. Now I'll tell you, if you've approached this entrance to the building, it's very noticeable to me. I would think to remove any guns or knives that I would be carrying, but unfortunately the visitors to the municipal court, the police station, are not doing that, and our our marshals are seizing guns and knives, unfortunately, too often at the municipal courts. This is a very necessary piece of equipment. And we also have our information technology municipal courts workers in the facility, and we need to keep them safe. So this is a very, very important replacement. We will also be purchasing for our new recruits, as described, additional mobile data computers, and we only just in the recent past have replaced mobile data computers for our police agents, and I want to just take a moment to describe those. You know, in the 90s, we brought in mobile data computers, and it was a great technology in that it was mobile, in that it was bolted to the car, but you could drive around in the car and undertake the policing activities. Now, mobile data computer means something different. It comes out of the squad car and goes with the police agent wherever she or he goes, so they can do their report writing, they can go into crime scene, business, home, whatever the case may be, and they can have a lot more flexibility and be more effective in the public. And there was a shot of that, of course. In 2019, the police department went live with a new records system, and this is with niche technologies. The city had been with the iLeads firm since 2003, and it was time for an update there, and the police department has accomplished that with a consortium of other cities. Yet, it's time for the last event to occur, which is a data conversion. And that's to bring the historic records, the historic activities over to the new system, and this is the final step in that entire process. We have to comply with public records retention laws and all the crime records related to that. We will also be bringing on new, not replacement, but we will be bringing on new technology for crime scene mapping, and Chief McCaskey described this as a digital tape measure. It allows our crime scene investigators to use this digital technology that creates a 3D map of crime scenes, which saves significant amount of time and increases accuracy. So I know that the police department will be excited to bring aboard this new technology. And then maybe on the other end of technology, perhaps, we will be purchasing for our police department volunteers a motorist assist vehicle. This makes a big impact on safety because at the rush hour, when there are accidents and the agent can't quite either respond or has higher priority calls or a number of accidents, the motorist assist vehicle can respond, which saves police agent time, quite frankly, but perhaps most importantly, creates a greater degree of safety at accidents. And if you've seen a car accident, and everybody has, you know that can continue to be a dangerous situation for a number of minutes after the accident, just due to the confusion and chaos and injury that can happen at those scenes. We will also be purchasing and implementing new Argus cameras in a few positions across the city, 5 of them, and the new cameras will have 360-degree technology, which will help in solving crimes. It will give a greater picture of crime scene areas and allow the police to be more effective there. We're still going to retain our original cameras and redeploy them in different areas across the city. So all of those are either new or replacement activities, and also a personnel update on the police department. I want to talk a little bit about new projects happening in our Public Works Department, and I can't do this justice in a reasonable amount of time, and I would invite everyone interested in activities to view Mr. Hutchison's pictures and comments at the study session. And most interestingly, one of my notes from his remarks was that while you won't see a picture and this won't be described as a project, the city's street resurfacing and concrete repair approaches nearly $10 million a year and will absolutely dwarf the combination of projects you're about to see. And yet it's so critical an investment because it protects those streets from having to be completely replaced at some time in the nearer future at an exponential cost. So the street resurfacing program is just so critical to everything that we're doing in our Public Works Department. So first, what you'll see here are really the sidewalk projects relative to Public Works, and let me just jump into them. The first is related to First Avenue at Creighton Middle School. This is noteworthy because Creighton is now adding 6th graders at its campus, and so there's a greater volume there, and so hence even more importance. But this was a major collaboration and accomplishment of a terrific grant, the Safe Routes to Schools grant, and was a collaboration between the school district, of course, Public Works, the cycling community in Lakewood, the police department, and Jefferson County Health to come together to complete this sidewalk adjacent to Creighton Middle School. And I think this also highlights the idea that each of these sidewalk projects, you'll note, do a few things. They either address school safety or enhancing school safety. They're in high traffic volume areas. They're in high speed traffic areas, and also offer connectivity from one sidewalk segment to the next, which is the key here at 20th Avenue. West of Owens to Nelson, a 1/4 mile of additional sidewalk will create a full 1 mile segment length. So filling in gaps, I suppose, is another way to describe it. And also a similar theme here on Sheridan, high volume. Everybody knows there's a lot of vehicle activity on Sheridan, and the speed limit is higher, obviously, given that it is a state highway. So you see the activity planned here. There's been progress on Sheridan, but we still have some gaps to fill. And then last but definitely not least is the pedestrian traffic occurring near Lakewood High School. And you can see that this is also a high volume, though not high speed area, but another one with gaps. And this budget will allow for construction and progress for sidewalks in this area. And you see a couple of shots where the schools have implemented and constructed some sidewalks, and then there are gaps. Of course, you see here, I think this is, well, it's either pickup or drop off. I can't tell which one that's occurring here. And you can see the volume of traffic very adjacent to pedestrians. So those are some of the things happening in Public Works. And I will close with just a final description of a new project that is being led by our Community Resources Department. Again, this was described in great detail and character by my colleague Kit Newland, and you can go look at her words and catch updates on all of the projects happening in both Public Works, the Police Department, and Community Resources by looking at the study session. But the major project happening there are the Bear Creek Trail improvements, and I think it was commented on earlier in public comment, some very interesting statistics, and I think also some follow-up opportunities for Director Newland. I'm sure she'll address those through the citizen response system so that everybody can see both the questions and the answers. They were coming pretty rapidly, and we'll address those in the future. But more than 450,000 people use Bear Creek Greenbelt annually, and that's just the people. We heard about the dogs too tonight, and that was quite a number. Conflicts and accidents occur regularly. I think we all heard that. And there were 3 very serious accidents that were reported by Director Newland at the last meeting on the subject. So the voters elected to allow 1/3 of their Tabor refund to go toward community resources type activities. Those funds are being allocated to this project. It's also fits well with the 2016 assessment and recommendations, and Jeffco Trails plan supports the project as well. So it's a nice convergence of a lot of different opportunities. So what are we doing out there? 17 1,000 feet of concrete trail will be widened to different sections depending on what's available. I think also noteworthy is this idea of sight lines. If you've been up and down the trail, I know many of you have and many in the audience have as well, there are often times when you can't quite see around the corner, and that can create some opportunities for bad things to happen and injuries. So we will be addressing those. And also a 4-foot wide crusher fines parallel trail will be occurring out at Bear Creek that will create some of the safety opportunities that were described in public comment. And I think many of the details of it were described by Director Newland. And then finally, there will be enhanced signage and striping on the paved portion of the trail to keep folks traveling in the same direction and hopefully prevent injuries and conflicts out on the trail. So with that, Mr. Mayor, that concludes my comments. As I mentioned, my colleagues are here tonight. We're prepared to answer any questions, but now is an opportunity for the public to speak on this 2020 budget, and I look forward to that very much. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So I'll open the public comment portion. Nobody's signed up. Mr. Mace, come on down. They have an agreement. Welcome back.
Thank you. This is just a quick clarifying question. How much money in fuel does the city spend annually for the police department every year? Can somebody please give me that answer?
We'll try to figure that out. If we can't tonight, we will sometime.
Thank you.
Welcome. Should be broke down. Anybody else? All right, I'll close public comment. Yeah. Sir.
Beg your pardon. I was just going to attempt to address Mr. Mace's question. We have many stats on the fuel budget, of course. Our Public Works Director, Mr. Hutchison, is here. But by department, I just need to dig a number out of the computer database, out of the office. But I'll be glad to report that through on the 28th. And I will tell you, it's in excess of 6 figures, but I couldn't give you any more detail than that.
Thank you. And there were some other questions I think that council had asked prior. I didn't know if you wanted to address those now.
Yeah, of course. I would be happy to open up the floor to any and all questions, but I did receive an email late this afternoon from Councilman Bita, and I'd be happy to just address these really quickly. And I don't think that all of council may have seen those, so I think I'll just kind of paraphrase. And Councilman Bita, if you wouldn't mind, hold me accountable for making sure I've got these paraphrased just correctly, because I don't want to read them verbatim. It'll take a little bit of time, so I'll just look to you for that. Sure. Well, we're going to take a shot at answering these for you. I think I had just enough time to really kind of have a look at those and then talk to one of my colleagues who will address one of the questions. So first, this is related to the city manager's budget message on page 26, if anybody's interested. The question is regarding the proposed spending for some personnel to occur. And it's in the police and public safety category. The city retained $8,152,000 that otherwise would have been refunded for Tabor. And a third of that is to be spent on police activities. And there's some personnel reported here. And generally the question is, it appears that $660,000 would be spent on 2 navigator positions and $784,000 for 2 police sergeants. And just to clarify, that's what's being committed to those positions. They will be funded for a number of years, at least 4 years, based on our projections from this source. So for the sake of transparency and making it add up to the total amount retained under Tabor, we went ahead and put the full 4 years there as opposed to having it year by year. It's essentially the amount committed to each of those initiatives, and the actual numbers will vary a little bit based on when the positions are hired and if they become vacant at all during the 4 years and so forth. So yes, the navigators will not be earning $330,000 each. Rather, that's how much is committed to the position over, we think, 4 years. So just want to address that. And I think that covers the first question and a half. There is a question as to the rationale for the choice. It says it is essentially not wise in using Tabor money for salaried positions. What's the rationale for the decision? This is the proposed budget to be reviewed and approved by council, of course, but the recommendation is that the public expects enhanced public safety. We have a way to do that with Tabor funds, yet the next question would be, what about at the end of the 4 years? And we'll have to solve that. It's unknown if we will have additional Tabor monies retained this year or next year or between now and 2025. We'll, of course, be monitoring that, but it allows time for that to become known and for that issue to be addressed. But at the very least, we can get these public safety workers into the budget and approved. That's essentially the rationale for the recommendation. The next few questions relate to the city manager's memo on page 29. Let me first describe that for anyone in the audience. First, it's a memo required under the 2005 Budget Policies Resolution. It essentially, the budget policy reads, if revenues and expenditures are not equal, then the city manager is to submit a memo describing the use of reserves or the use of fund balance. And I know we've had this conversation a couple of times in the last few budgets, and I've explained it this way. Each year, the city underspends its appropriations, typically 4%, 5%, 6%, depending on the year. And some years ago, the council gave direction to the staff to the idea of, let's use that savings. Let's not continue to be underspent when we have needs in the community. We want to increase our police staffing and do other things. So we would like to see a draft budget that anticipates a savings or that authorizes appropriations greater than anticipated revenues with the idea that we will see a savings. That was the direction from a few years ago. It took a year or so to implement, and during 2017 and 2018, all of that occurred. If you look at the audited results of the city, you'll see that the actual savings has achieved a level where reserves have relatively stayed the same, meaning revenues have equaled expenditures within a couple $100,000 on a $120 million budget. So that mission has been accomplished. We anticipate that happening for 2019 and for 2020. So with that, the specific question is really a question around how does this constitute a special circumstance? When effectively we're doing that from year to year, how is that special, quote unquote? it seems as though the special circumstances are we want to use the funds and the funds are available. And I would tell you that that's really the case. That's been the direction from the council in creating our budgets in the last, this would be the fourth budget that contemplates that. It'd be the 17, 18, 19, and this would be the 2020 budget that does just that. It says, we do have a special circumstance. We want to provide these services to the community. It is within policy 2005 Resolution 48, and the city manager describes that here. The next question on about page 29 says that it anticipates the use of $11.6 million in reserves this year. And that's different than the number in the original 19 budget, which was more like $5 million. And so the question is, instead of the $6 million we were told last year, which would be offset by vacancy, what's occurred there is that the amount retained from the Tabor 2D funds for 2018 were about $6.2 million in the general fund, and those monies are being transferred out to the newly created Tabor fund. So when you add the $6 million for the Tabor fund and about $5 million in the operating overage, those two add up to the $11.6 million that's described here. And if you have a look at the Tabor fund, you can see that money being transferred in. So that's the difference. But it is a big number and it is a change. So I'm glad to have had the opportunity to describe that. So those first few are sort of taken care of in those first couple of pages. And then the next few questions relate to police department staffing and activities. I'm going to just talk about some of the numbers and clarify a couple of things and also refer to my slides. But I'll ask Chief McCaskey to talk a little bit about the concept of management versus frontline agents. He'll do that here in a moment. But first, let me describe the questions. It's noted that the FTEs in the police department are essentially unchanged over the last few years, but increases by 2 in 2020. I assume the 2 sergeants are paid by Tabor. That indeed is correct. And then the policy question, does this really make sense in light of the dramatic increase in population and the perception that our agents are stretched very thin on the street? While you don't see the FTE increase, what you do see are the recruit classes, the recruit police academies, and if you did the math on my earlier slide, which I've done here just in response, we have 15 agents in field training that are not seen or felt yet in the community. We have 28 in the recruit academy at the moment, and we're planning for 24 recruits. That's 77 altogether. Now, some of the new recruits will obviously replace some folks who may retire. So I'm not saying that we're going to add 77 positions to the force, but we're going to add 40 to 50 here within 12 months. And that's a big number, and it's something that hasn't been done before. So we're going to digest those. From an FTE standpoint, you don't necessarily see it, but I could tell you all 43 of those first and last names of those folks that will be released onto the streets here, as I say, within 12 months. And then we will continue to report the police academies to occur in 2020 and what those numbers look like. So next, let me just describe a couple of questions Councilor Bita that has related to the police department staffing and the concept of management and so forth. Let's see. Beg your pardon, I'm just scanning to the proper question. Thank you. It's mentioned that 2 short-term and long-term goals for the police department, which involve stemming the increase in crime and quality of life concerns that the city is experiencing, chronic and growing crime patterns and trends, yet no increase in FTEs agents on the street. Again, in spite of the difficulties we've had filling our allotted positions, shouldn't we be looking at adding more agents long-term instead of what appears to be empty rhetoric? I think I've addressed the concept of FTEs versus what's happening in our recruit classes and our police academy, but I'll also ask Chief McCaskey to talk a little bit about the staffing up and the number of agents and non-sworn who complement the agents when he comes up here in just a moment. And I think I'll just skip 7 and go straight to number 8 so that Chief McCaskey can do that while we're on the subject. It says, it seems like an inordinately high number of sergeants compared to agents on the street, commanders and other management, and it seems we are top heavy. Why is this necessary in this department of college-educated agents? And I'll introduce Chief Dan McCaskey to address the combination of staffing and the management versus agent ratio. Chief?
Good evening, Chief. Welcome.
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor and City Council. I just want to start with a few numbers, first of all. The police department, we are authorized 282 sworn positions. 233 of those are police agent positions. Currently, with my attrition, I have 216 police agent positions that are fully functioning. Add the 15 from the academy that they're about to graduate, at field training, add another 28 that are in the academy that will graduate in December, become fully functional probably April of 2020, and that gives me 259 sworn agents. And again, I'm authorized 233. Since I have been chief for 3 years now, we have not been at authorized strength. And probably 2, maybe even 3 years under Chief Paletta, we were not at authorized strength. We struggle to hire police agents, just like every law enforcement agency in the country struggles to hire law enforcement officers. It's not a particularly good profession for people to go into based on the scrutiny, based on the danger, and the fact that you can lose your life in this profession. So, and with a strong economy, we have had difficulty hiring. There's no secret about that. I've said that all along, but this is the first time since I've been chief that we're going to get close, or we will be over our authorized staffing levels. And I know there's a question about supervision. 24 sergeants with 170 FTE. There are other FTE in there too. There are 9 CSOs. That's about 7.5 personnel for one sergeant to monitor. And in my professional experience, 35 years in law enforcement, I'm going to stand by that and argue that that is an appropriate amount. We're not top heavy. And here's the thing to consider too. We've hired probably, and I don't have the exact number, probably 125 agents over the last 3 to 5 years. These are young men and women, inexperienced, that to sit there and think that they can go out on the street and not be supervised, or have a sergeant supervise 10 or 12 of these men and women it's not a smart move on the police department. It's a high liability profession. We need the supervision. You'll find that you talk to any police professional in this country and they will tell you young employees make mistakes because of lack of experience. We have a very young workforce. College educated, they're still police agents. I can argue that, and having been a sergeant, having supervised young men and women in my career, I was a sergeant for probably 10, 12 years in this organization. I supervised, I was in my, and this is just sort of personal experience, I was in my early 30s when I was promoted, and I'm supervising young men and women who are 21, 22 years old. So we have a young workforce. You have to supervise them. You need that, or you have a liability. Do I have a set figure of what that supervision level should be? No, but 7.5 employees per sergeant, I think, is probably is very reasonable. Hopefully that addresses that question. So while I'm here, I can answer others as well. Okay.
Like I said, I wasn't expecting it.
Keep talking to your mic.
No, I appreciate the question, but yeah.
So I appreciate you getting this out this early, and again, part of it's just for our public, so they understand our budget process and the scrutiny that we are putting on it to try and ask relevant questions. So, and I appreciate you doing that, both of you. Thank you.
Anything else for the chief? All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Beta, too, for getting those in as well.
Thank you, Chief McCaskey. Mr. Mayor, I'm glad that we could address these. I've just got a couple more that are really brief, if I may, Mr. Mayor. I'll just get these done, and we can address any other questions that come up. It is asked on page 117, you'll see $11.2 million budgeted for 2019 for the Community Resources Department. Where is the detail on this item? First, let me just describe what the two numbers are that make up the $11,217,522. First, it's the $8.5 million for the Conservation Fund or the Open Space Acquisition. So that's $8.5 million, and that was from a year ago. And that is detailed in Resolution 1836. That can be viewed. And you can see the criteria and what that's used for those in the audience. And then also, if you add to the 8.5 million, 2,717,522, that's the amount you saw on my slide earlier tonight for community resources, which is for the Bear Creek Greenbelt project. So those funds will be appropriated too. That's described on page 26 of the budget book also. Now, you might have a question about the 8.5 million, and there's an appropriation there. Yes, the recommendation is that council make an $8.5 million appropriation for its convenience, and I'll describe what that means. Should council decide to acquire a property with its conservation fund, by the way, only council can make that choice. Council would have a choice. Without the appropriation, it would have to adopt a 2-meeting ordinance to set forth appropriations and the intent to acquire real property. And as you know, with lead time and public hearings, that can take, let me just say, a certain amount of time. If council makes its appropriations and chooses to acquire a property, it can do that via resolution, authorizing the acquisition of a certain property of a certain description of a certain type, and that can be done in less time. And oftentimes timing is of the essence and when involved in negotiations and so forth. So this is merely a convenience for council to have a quicker amount of time to potentially save money and or make an acquisition that it might not otherwise make. So there aren't any specific properties tied to that, but rather the whole 8.5 is appropriated so that council could very quickly via resolution. That's the only way it can be done. Only council has the authority to make that acquisition, and it would be via resolution in that case. The next to last question is, where are the funds budgeted for the development of the open space purchased in 2018 for $7 million, formerly referred to as the Taylor property? And that is on page 492. You can see that under community resources. You'll see $600,000 there, and that's appropriated. Director Newland could describe the phase of the process and so forth. I know that it is a complicated project, and there will be a lot of community outreach going on related to that. But the funds are budgeted. Page 492, you can have a look at that. And then the last question is, are we increasing the mill levy for the 2019 revised budget over the original budget, over previous year's mill levy? If so, how much is the increase or increases? And this is a a good point related to the ordinance that adopts the budget. It also certifies the mill levy. That must be done each year under state law so that the county can properly assess the mill levy and collect the property taxes. The county treasurer collects the taxes, remits them to the city. The assessor, of course, determines the amount of tax due and the assessment rates and all that good business. But council must certify its mill levy via ordinance each year, and that's being done in the budget ordinance, the long one that Madam Clerk described here in our opener. And the answer is the mill levy has been unchanged for many decades in Lakewood. The only thing that can change the mill levy is a vote of the people. That would be a tax increase requiring an election. Now, a couple of years ago, when the city was making Tabor refunds, there was a temporary credit against the full mill levy, but the full mill levy was never changed. So there isn't necessarily a page to that, but if you take a look at the ordinance over the years, you'll see that that hasn't been increased, and I know that cannot be done without a vote of the people. That's fairly evident, and that's not only in accordance with Tabor, but you should know that that's a part of the city charter as well. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I think that addresses the email and written questions. I think a question from the audience, we handled that. So if there are any others, we'll be back for another public hearing.
I appreciate that. I don't see any right now, but I also appreciate those questions and all those answers. It's good for everybody to get caught up and hear those, so thank you. I don't see any other questions or comments, so I will ask for a motion to accept this and advance it to the 28th. Is that accurate? Okay.
Mayor, I move to accept ordinance O-2019-38 on first reading and order the ordinance to be published in the Denver Post with second public hearing set for October 28, 2019.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Please cast your votes. That passes 11 ayes, 0 nays. Thank you all very much, and we'll be back for probably a much briefer presentation, but in the meantime, if there are any questions, please get them to the staff. Thank you. Yes. Okay. Next up is the consent agenda. The consent agenda has been made to expedite council action. It contains both resolutions and first reading ordinances. Resolutions are items of a routine nature. Members of the public will have an opportunity in a moment to comment on any of the proposed resolutions. First reading ordinances appear on the agenda only for the purpose of setting future public hearing dates and ordering the newspaper publication of the proposed ordinance. No public comments will be heard this evening on first reading ordinances. The public will have the opportunity to comment on the proposed ordinances during the scheduled public hearings on the dates set tonight by City Council. Any council member may request an item on the consent agenda be removed for separate discussion and action under general business. Will the clerk please read the consent into the record?
Consent agenda consists of items 8 through 11 inclusive. Item 8, Resolution 2019-42, supporting a grant application for local parks and outdoor recreation grant from the State Board of the Great Outdoors Colorado GOCO Trust Fund for the completion of Green Mountain High School athletic improvements and authorizing the Director of Community Resources to execute a grant agreement and intergovernmental agreement if approved. Item 9, Resolution 2019-43, authorizing a revocable license agreement between the City of Lakewood and Sheridan Station West Metropolitan District along the south side of the city-owned parcel of land for Dry Gulch Trail Park located approximately at 5600 West 11th Avenue to allow construction and maintenance of pedestrian and bicycle plaza with seating, steps, walls, and related appurtenances. Item 10, Ordinance O-2019-39, concerning the refunding of a certain outstanding municipal lease and option agreement entered into for the purpose of financing public safety use and the expansion of the police academy to a regional training facility, authorizing the execution and delivery by the city of a site lease between the city as lessor and the Zion's Band Corporation, N.A. as lessee, and an annual renewable lease purchase agreement between Zion's Band Corporation, N.A. as lessor and the city as lessee, approving the forms of certain related documents, ratifying action previously taken in connection therewith, authorizing a supplemental budget appropriation of $1,550,000 and approving and providing other matters related thereto. Item 11, approving minutes of the City Council meeting. City Council regular meeting, May 13, 2019.
Thank you. I'll now open the public hearing on the consent agenda with public comment on resolutions 42 and 43. Nobody's signed up to speak. Seeing none, I'll close public comment. Ask for a motion.
Mayor Paul, I move for approval of the council minutes. Order all ordinances introduced on first reading to be published in the Denver Post with public hearings set for the date included in the ordinance and for adoption of resolutions, all of which are included in the consent agenda items introduced into the record by the city clerk.
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? Mayor Pro Tem Abel.
There's on item 10, concerning the refunding of a certain outstanding municipal lease, that means funding again. We're not getting a refund from it. Is that a correct reading of this?
I beg your pardon?
Is that a correct reading of this? That
No, let me address this in the big picture, and then of course we'll have many more details at a public hearing and so forth related to this. The expression refunding is really just an expanded version of what we more commonly say as a refinance. So the city will just be refinancing an existing debt on a facility for a lower interest rate. We're hopefully doing 3 of those this month because the interest rates have been very, very favorable. So I think the question was, will there be any refunding or refund? No, one bank is paying off another bank, just like with a home loan at the end of the day. It's the same term, which is 10 years to go. It's a police facility, fixed interest rate, very straightforward. I wish it was more exciting. Actually, I'm very excited about it. It's quite a drop in interest rate, quite frankly. But
so we're paying off and refunding.
Yes.
Or paying off and refinancing.
Correct, yes. I will just, well, more explicitly, the Vectra Bank and its parent Zion's Bank Corp will be paying off Alpine Bank, which the city has been paying 10 years on this facility at about 4.5% interest. We'll be paying less than 3%. So that's exciting, and we'll save over $100,000 in interest in the coming 10 years. So I'm very excited about it. We'll have many more details. But yeah, one bank's paying off the other, our payments going down. It's really that exciting. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Thank you.
All right, there's a motion second. I just have one comment, and it has to do with number 42. Green Mountain High School has been trying to get this accomplished, I think, since Ms. Hodson was the director of community resources. So a long time, and hopefully they can get this through. So very cool. All right, with that, please cast your votes. Passes 11 ayes, 0 nays. Thank you. The clerk, please read item 12.
Item 12, ordinance O-2019-37, adjusting the compensation of Lakewood City Council.
Thank you very much.
Mayor
Peterson, yep.
Can I introduce the new interim of Human Resource Department? This is Corey Peterson.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Peterson. Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Throw up the slide there. So as you know, this is a single slide summary of the proposed ordinance 2019-37, first read on September 23rd by my predecessor, Mr. Dolan. This ordinance is to increase compensation for city council members. As you also know, under the city charter, city council has an opportunity prior to this election to adjust their compensation rate. Background is the annual compensation was last adjusted in 2019, November 3rd to be specific. Both the Lakewood Advisory Commission and the Human Resources Benefits team have looked at this, done a survey of both national and local compensation rates, and the proposed rate is within the error or the margin of error for being equal and equivalent based on the size of the city. The current rate is $12,873 per year plus benefits, and the proposed rate per the ordinance is $15,456 per year plus benefits, which, if you do the math with 10 people, would be an overall change of about $25,830 per year to increase everybody. If approved, this increase would go into effect on the 1st of December for continuing members of City Council, and would be effective on the 25th of November for new members when they are sworn into City Council. With that, I will take questions, but first I would like to introduce the incoming Total Rewards Manager, who will be taking Ms. Nancy Rohde's place, who will be retiring from the city after 27 years of service in December. So we're fortunate to have a good handoff, and so we have nobody is going to have any benefit challenges since we were able to do that. So I'll take my seat, and if you have any questions, feel free to address myself or Ms. Gallagher.
Great, thank you very much. We're going to go ahead and open the public hearing, even though nobody's indicated a wish to speak. I'll close the public hearing. Are there any questions or comments? I have a comment. I certainly will be in support of this. I think it's a good opportunity for council members, and I think actually when we were doing our research, we were talking about the last time this had happened, and we thought it was 2013 or 11, but that was just for the mayor. So council compensation actually goes, oh, there it is right there, 2009, but that's some time ago. Although, is that 2009 number accurate, or was that just for mayor in 09?
2011 was for mayor, sir.
Okay, all right, thank you. So I will be supporting. Councilor Roybal?
Oh boy, this sounds real exciting. I can honestly talk about this. Just for the record, I'm termed out, so I'll be leaving in November. So I have an opportunity to speak about this. And I'll just tell you, working here for council, it's not just 9 to 5. It's day, night, mornings. You give a lot for council, and the more you get into the committees, the more you get into talking to the people, it takes a lot of time. And you know, frankly, my business did suffer a little bit, but I was intent to go ahead and follow through for the 8 years. So I honestly can tell you, this compensation of $3,000 isn't much, but it sure does help. Especially what I would like to see is we get folks coming in and wanting to participate in government. And when we raise the rates just a little bit, I think people may think twice and say, well, let me try that. So I'm going to be supporting it. Thank you.
All right, any other comments? Did you make a motion? Councilor Bida?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I have to agree with my co-councilor's statements. He's absolutely right. Unfortunately, this puts our council in a really horrible position here. It puts us in a conflict of interest, really, to be voting on our own compensation. And I consider it a flaw in our system, really. It is included in our charter, so unless we change the charter to a different method, we have no choice. And I would suggest that maybe in the coming year we take a look at some other way of doing this. I think a citizens commission, similar to our advisory committee, but a commission that was made up of citizens only, who would come in, make the decision on compensation, and that would be it, without any of us in council being involved in the decision. I think that would be much cleaner. It would be the decision by the people, and they should be the ones really deciding, one, what we should get paid, and two, whether we deserve a raise. And so, but it puts us in an awful conflict, and I know all of my counselors must be feeling the same thing. Where I have to come down on this is that, I haven't even been on council 2 years. It'll be 2 years in November, so I'm not even there 2 years yet. And for me to come in and vote myself a raise at this juncture, just to me, it's a breach of trust. It's a matter of principle, and I really can't feel that I can justify that to my constituents. They didn't elect me to come in and give myself a raise. They elected me to do a lot of other things. The other thing I'd point out is, last year we detabered, and we asked the taxpayers to let us keep their tabor refunds, and so now, so closely juxtaposed to that decision, which the taxpayers graciously allowed us to do that, but and said, yes, you can use our tabor refunds, but they said some very specific purposes for that. And so, and I know this is not going to come out of tabor, but necessarily it's all part of the same process, and for us to now, short time later, go in and giving ourselves a raise after we've asked the voters for the tabor refund just doesn't sit right with me. So for all those reasons, I'm going to have to vote no.
Thank you, sir. Councilor Skilling.
I do agree with my term-limited colleague here to my right that it's not a question of whether or not this council has earned the money. Pro Tem Abel has often opined at what our hourly rate is, and I think he's always high on that number. So I don't think it's really that question. I think, and I don't want to get too either hyperbolic or symbolic or any of that, but at a time when we had discussions about Action Center last year, them having some issues. We have a lot of debate up here when we wanted to do the 100,000. We've heard now the 1A discussion. I think at some point we can just say it's $3,000, and I think at this point I can see all the points to it. I just don't know whether or not it makes sense at this point to raise it. I appreciate Councilor Bita's comments about a citizen commission or something taken out of our hands. It does seem strange for us to vote in a raise, and especially with everything else going on, it seems a little strange to do that. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents.
Mayor Pro Tem.
The figure that Mr. Skilling referred to is like 75 cents an hour. I think we're worth 75 cents an hour, maybe no more. I won't belabor it, but although every municipality I know of handles pay raises for council elected officials this way, there are some concerns about where our budget's going and expected declines in revenue, and I am just not comfortable voting myself a raise or voting council a raise with that looming in the future. So I'll be voting against it, but I have no judgments on those who vote for it.
Councilor Harrison.
Thank you, Mayor. When we originally talked about this, one of the things that I think when you look at this second bullet that's shown here, the last time annual compensation was adjusted was in 2009. That was 10 years ago. We've had a whole different council since that point in time. If you looked at what the expenses were for the average council member in 2009 compared to what it is today, childcare is more expensive, gas is, well, probably about the same, but One of the things that I think we need to think about is anyway, when I vote to support this, I'm not voting it for me. I'm voting it potentially for that next 10 years. I don't know when we're going to do this again. So it's not for me. I will be supporting it for the rest and the future council members that we want to come on to this council. If we don't make it financially feasible for people to be involved in council, they won't be, period. And we need to be able to make it to where someone can be, this is kind of a part-time job, as all of us know, and we have to have some compensation for that, or people won't want to run, because as all of us have gotten those phone calls that are kind of hard to listen to, there's, we do this because we love our community and we want to do it, but we've got to sow some future seeds, and that is, I'd be supporting this.
Councilor Johnson.
Thank you. I understand everybody's thoughts, and I agree with you, Councilor Harrison. This was taken to the ACIC, I think it was at that time, and we don't do this for the money, that's for sure. I spend probably 8 to 12 hours a day on council, and partially because I'm a slow reader, but the amount of gas, going to different events that you're expected to attend, different contributions to different things, and to take it to 15,456 really does not seem overly generous to me. I think it's, at least it covers your expenses. And if you can't financially at some point offset what it costs to serve, then the only people that you're going to attract to run are going to be folks that financially it's not a problem for them. And I'm not sure that we don't eliminate some people. We want to have folks who are serving of all economic strata. So I will be supporting it.
Councilor Gutwein.
Well, I just want to echo what some of my colleagues up here have said, including Councilor Johnson and Harrison and Roybal. I think you all said it really well. But this whether we like it or not, this decision is supposed to be made by us as council, and I think that it's our job to look to the future and make sure that we do get a diverse group of representatives up here. And I think that this small raise will help accomplish that. And I've said this before, but I believe every single one of you up here is worth every cent of that potential $15,000. And, just to reiterate what Councilor Harrison said, this isn't about giving any of ourselves a raise. It's about giving the next group a raise, and certainly the voters will have their say if they don't like the decisions that we make up here. So thank you. I will be supporting this.
Call for the question.
Okay, I think it was done anyways, but thank you. I know.
Maybe she got a question.
I understand that. Do we withdraw that so we can just?
I withdraw that.
All right, thank you. I'll ask for a motion. How's that? Okay. Thank you.
Mayor, I move for the adoption of ordinance 2019-37 on second and final reading.
Second.
All right, motion is second. No more discussion. Please cast your votes. That passes 7 ayes, 4 nays. The nays being Skilling, Abel, Beta, and Franks. Okay. So under general business, we have a council request item. Councilor Johnson, I think this was your request, and I think Councilor Skilling had responded to part of this as well.
Thank you, Council. This item for consideration is to restore a definition regarding student living unit to the zoning ordinance that was deleted in the 2012 rewrite of the zoning ordinance. I want to categorically say I am very proud of CCU. I very happy that they're in Ward 1. They are a real asset to this community. And I absolutely support the curriculum and the values that they have. Having said that, back into there's been a long road to get us here tonight. And back in 2003, there was a group from the community. They met with the city councilors. The group from the community had an attorney. CCU, I believe, had an attorney. And they all came to a consensus regarding some crankiness regarding residential issues and students. The attorneys felt that it was the right move to do, and so council in 2003 added this to the zoning ordinance. They did their research, their legal due diligence. They studied it. They looked at what other communities did, and it sort of mirrored what other communities have as well. Well, then in 2012, the total zoning rewrite eliminated this definition. I was not aware of it until the neighbors there near CCU brought it to my attention. It was never pointed out to council. It was never redlined. And when the neighbors went to the planning department, they were told that it was not codified. I'm not sure how that happened. And at that time, CCU, or during the 2003 when it was added, CCU did divest from 13 properties. It's unfortunate that it was deleted, and I think we've got a bigger problem, really, that something was taken out of our ordinance without telling council. I understand you're going to have a study session in December. I think it would be appropriate actually to go forward and to put this into the zoning ordinance even prior to that. When something is deleted like this and there is no notification either of the community or of council, this is one of the frustrations within the community that causes a lack of trust with us, frankly. And it was arbitrarily removed. No definition why. And it just needs to be added, and I'd like to see us do that as soon as possible. I'm not sure how it will change the dynamics, but we're going to have to just let the cards fall as they will and do what we should have not done in 2012. So I ask for your support of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Abel.
I wish Mr. Parker was here to give us an update or to bring us up to speed on how this was left out of the 2012 ordinance. I believe when I spoke to him about it, he said that staff determined it was no longer needed because of other things in the zoning amendment, zoning ordinance amendment process. What that boils down to is a decision was made administratively to remove something that was approved by city council as an elected body. And I don't believe that that is proper. So apparently also when this was taken out of the zoning ordinance, there was no notice given to council that it had been eliminated. The council that approved that zoning ordinance amendment then did so without knowing this was being changed, and I find that concerning. So I believe it is up to us to restore the decision of previous council. If we want then to later remove it, it needs to be done with the full notification to council of what we're taking out of the document. As it sets, for council to know this had been removed, they would have had to check 200-300-page documents page by page to see what was changed. There was no redlining, which is a method of showing in one document on the same page what is changing in the ordinance. That was not done in this case. So I think we're just returning to the ordinance what was properly approved by council and removed without council's approval or knowledge. So I'll be voting for this, and I would encourage my colleagues to do so. Thank you.
Mr. LeBear.
Thank you, Mayor. Obviously, we have our study session, it sounds like, so we're going to learn a little bit more about this. But I just wanted to add, I think it would be helpful just to have a sense of how other communities have dealt with this issue, because I've heard a lot of different things about this particular subject, but surely we're not inventing the wheel here. There's a lot of communities that have universities, and I'm sure they have this use issue in Fort Collins or Red Rocks or Washington, D.C., wherever, DU, I don't know. I just think it would be helpful to have some sort of reference for, how things are being determined. Thanks.
Councilor Franks.
Thanks, Mayor Paul. I guess for me, I need to understand, certainly the history, is one piece, but I need to understand what is our risk. We had a woman share with us that she believes she's at some risk for a lease expiring, and so she's at imminent risk. And so that leaves me in a very uncomfortable position if I'm to take these facts as being true, which I don't know if they are, but if there was a agreement that then came before a prior council and they put something in, and then there was the lack of either redlining or the lack of a summary statement, and I don't know if those things are true. I mean, there's no way for me to know that sitting here. What I do know is I don't feel comfortable leaving here tonight if I have a tenant who is at risk for a potential oversight or mistake that was made. So I need clarity around that, because I'm not comfortable leaving here until I provide some level of comfort that we know that we are not harming someone in the absence of good quality information.
Yeah, and that's tough to know without I think those are two separate issues. I don't think there's anything that has to do with student housing. CCU has not moved any students into these houses since this was brought forth. So the goal was to try to work this out in an amenable fashion, and the neighborhood would really like to see action. But I would say that I don't think the lease option is something that's dependent on this definition at this current point. And CCU has worked with those tenants and redone those leases and tried to be, I think, accommodating in that fashion. So I think that might be two separate issues. But again, that's more information that we're going to need that I don't think we can answer here tonight. Ms. Hodson, did you want to weigh in on that, or?
Yes. So the study session was scheduled for December 2nd. And as Councilor Skilling said, it's really because we only have one regular meeting in November. So it was our next option for a study session. Once that got scheduled, I made a call to the administration of CCU asking them to be present for that study session so that they can be a part of that discussion. I think that's really the best we can do in terms of lease conditions with the tenants. I agree with the mayor, we haven't heard anything different. Yeah, so I think that'll be helpful, and that'll help round out the conversation to have the representatives from CCU. I also appreciate Councilor LeBeur's request to better understand how other communities deal with this situation when there are universities and colleges in their community. That's real pertinent information, and we can do that just by searching communities in our own state, like Golden next door to us, and Fort Collins and Boulder. So that's something that we can prepare, and I think we've done some of that work, but we can update that work before the meeting on December 2nd.
Councilor Skilling.
Just by way of background, the July 9th Development Dialogue Committee meeting that we had was maybe our most attended meeting that we've ever had, and we have very well attended meetings, and that was probably the most. And it was also the most, it was very civil, but it was, there was debate, and there was a lot of debate and a lot of issues that were brought out of that meeting. The minutes, we anticipate in the next couple of weeks when we have the next Development Dialogue meeting, which is at the end of October, those meetings will be, the minutes will be finalized, and Laura in planning has done a fantastic job of actually transcribing a lot of the back and forth. I have no idea how she does that so well, but she did a very good job of that. And so that everyone can read the hours of public comment that we had, including a lot of folks from CCU. The administration was there, their attorneys were there, leaders from the neighborhood were there, citizens were there, half of this council was there, but the other half wasn't. And why that's important is because this issue is storied. There's a lot of history, and there's a lot of legal issues that go into this. It's no secret that there is a disagreement about whether it's legal to do the things that some of the neighborhood may want to see. There are questions on both sides of that, and those are the things that we need attorneys here, we need the CCU folks here, we need this council to hear the things that we heard as part of the committee, and also that we've heard from community members in emails. I think the study session on December 2nd, I wouldn't schedule anything else necessarily on that day, because I think, as we saw in that committee meeting, it will be well attended and there will be a lot of points of views expressed, but it will give the new council, and maybe it's all these same folks, except for, of course, Pete over here, but it will give everyone a chance to understand this issue. One of the fears would be, if we went forward right now, the timing would be as such that I don't think it gives this issue enough of a chance to have the discussion, the community input that it deserves. And this is a hot topic, I get it. I saw that when we scheduled it. I don't think Planning Commission took it up, but we took it up, and I'm glad I did. I learned a lot that I didn't know, and I heard a lot of different points of view, and I appreciated everyone that spoke, whether it's Mr. Baker and Mr. Dreyfus, who have very different points of view, but they were very civil. And you learn a lot just from reading the minutes and listening to those two gentlemen discuss the issues. And also council that was there to also ask questions and participate in that. And I want that for this full council. And I think the difference between, obviously, October 28th maybe is the proposal versus December 2nd. I think all of these things can be addressed at one time on December 2nd.
Councilor Bida.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to address the issue of the existing tenants and what their fate might be in the coming weeks and months. And I think it needs to be understood that, First of all, I don't know how we can act tonight. We've got a law in place. We're talking about changing the law in place, a zoning law, zoning ordinance, and we got to go. There's a process to do that, and I don't know how legally we can sit here tonight and make that change without going through that process. It's impossible and to do it legally. So that's number one. But even if we did, even if we bent all the rules and said tonight we're going to restore that provision here, that's giving these folks who are in a position where their leases are up or coming up, it's giving them false hope that somehow they're going to be renewed. CCU has every right as the owner of the property to determine whether they want to renew a lease or not. And whether or not we pass this ordinance tonight or tomorrow or next month, that's not going to make any difference. Now, they may as well say, well, under the circumstance, we'll keep you or whatever, but there's no legal requirement for CCU to renew any of these leases. So I think to give these people false hope by taking some kind of action tonight is really, somewhat irresponsible. And I wish it was something we could do, but this thing's been brewing a long time. And, to Councilor Skilling's credit, our Development Dialogue Committee agreed to take this thing up after it had been bouncing around for quite some time. And we did have a lengthy hearing, and it was all public comment. I don't think we had much to say at all, the councilors on this committee. It was all public comment. Am I right? And then, we're busy here. We've got a lot of other things on our plate besides this. I'm not saying this isn't important, but this council's been pretty darn busy the last 3 months. We were here till midnight, 1 o'clock many times, taking care of the public's business. So I think we've done, the best we can, and we will continue to do that. But I think it's given these people false hope if they somehow think by taking this action, that's going to force CCU to renew their leases. Those are two separate issues. So that's all I've got to say.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I think we're clouding the issue. The rent, the leases is also clouding the issue. That's not to be considered here. What we're looking at here is whether it is proper for an administrative action to overrule a vote of city council. The other thing we're missing here is that if we look at what Fort Collins does, what Boulder does, and what Golden does, it's more or less irrelevant. CCU is not a legal arm of the state. Colorado School of Mines in Golden is an arm of the state government. University of Colorado in Boulder is an arm of state government. CSU in Fort Collins is an arm of state government, and because of that, they're not answerable to those cities' zoning ordinances at all. Is that correct, Mr. Cox?
Yeah, it is correct. They're all state agencies.
Thank you. So I would suggest if we look at other cities, let's look at what Colorado Springs does with Colorado College. Let's look at what other cities do with universities and colleges that are not part of the state system. Those are the only things that compare to CCU and Lakewood and their relationship. CCU is subject to our zoning ordinances. CCU is a very good school, and they're an asset to this community. Their students are very good members of our community. They don't set fire to couches on their porch. The only complaint I've heard about the behavior of those students is they park in the wrong places. So do I. So it is not about the students, it's not about the school, it is about the integrity of our zoning code and whether it can be changed on the whim, I won't say whim, on the decision of an administrator that a previous council's action is no longer valid. That's the issue we're talking about tonight. Can the administration overrule what council has put in place without telling council, hey, we're changing this? That's where we are. And again, it is not CSU, it's not School of Mines, and it's not CU. It is a private college that is answerable to our zoning code. This has nothing to do with the tenants or the leases. It has to do with the language in our zoning ordinance that was changed without council's knowledge. Thank you.
Councilor Harrison.
One more thing, I'm not expecting to do anything tonight.
Thank you. That was going to be my question, because if you were going to ask me to do something tonight, I was going to say I cannot, will not, don't have the time. I mean, there's so many questions with this. I think maybe, I'm not even sure if a study session is where I think maybe after December 2nd, maybe we can come back and talk about this, but this is very complicated and I'm not willing to vote in support of it at this point. I understand your concerns, but it's got a lot of other things that we've got to look at here, in my mind, so.
Councilor Franks, you had a follow-up.
Well, and more just to say, you know, number one, thank you all for the work you've done. I've clearly just in the last few minutes heard about a lot of stuff. Obviously, I wasn't at the meeting. Certainly never want to give somebody false hope, but certainly have to ask the question of impact, because we know that that was discussed in July, and then the meeting just took extra time to get scheduled. And so we know that there's been a delay. I think that it's also important for us to, when we get to that study session, you know, because it sounds like obviously that zoning rewrite was a pretty hefty lift, and I don't know that everything was redlined. I know it came out of a lot of other information, but I think it's worthy to, on the December 2nd, to have all of those who are of us who are still on council to read those if we didn't attend that meeting, get caught up so we don't have to maybe repeat asking a lot of questions that have already been asked and answered, and then really be prepared to determine what the best path is from there. So I'm perfectly fine with that, and I appreciate Councilor Bida. You know, we certainly don't want to put that out to the public. We certainly want to respect everybody's rights, but this does sound more complicated, and so I think the December 2nd session makes perfect sense.
Councilor Gutwein.
That was kind of what I was wondering, is essentially, are we voting tonight to include this as part of the December 2nd discussion?
So I think this,
is this a totally
separate? I think this would be the December 2nd discussion, is this exact topic.
Thank you. I am fine to put this off to December 2nd if it indeed will be taken up at that time. Then I think it's appropriate to discuss it then. And I like the idea of including CCU and having, but we also need to understand that council was not notified, and there is a bigger issue out there, not only regarding this, but if there were other things, frankly, that were taken out of the zoning ordinance, I don't know. And I'm a little concerned about that, but I'm fine with keeping this on the agenda in December the 2nd, so long as it is taken up then. Thank you.
Councilor LeBeer.
Thank you. I just want to say to Councilor Abel's points, happy to take a look at the process and, you know, how we got to this point. I think that's something we should do. And then I just want to clarify my comments previously, whether it's CSU, whatever. Obviously, we need to be comparing apples to apples. So if it's DU that we need to be taking a look at or whatever, fine. My point really is just the same, which is in our committee meetings, I asked if we could compare and take a look at what other communities have done so we're not reinventing the wheel. And I think that would help be illustrative in this at this point. Surely Lakewood, Colorado isn't the only place in the United States that's dealt with this issue, so I assume there's some good court issues or whatever else out there that might be illustrative that could help guide us in how we move forward. Because I know there's going to be at some point a conversation about what's the legality, what's the, you know, all the other elements that Mr. Skilling already alluded to earlier, and that we heard in our committee hearing, or committee discussion. Thanks.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I guess I'm the lone voice in the wilderness, but I don't want to wait until December 2nd to consider something that should never have occurred in the first place. It's possible there could be some harm done if we wait that long. So I may be the only one up here that feels that way, but I think we need to take care of it in the next week or two.
Well, I certainly, I think the process, if you were going to implement any sort of ordinance change, we'd have to have that language produced, and you'd have to have a first reading on the 28th. So I think there's been a lot said, and some folks have been working, you know, really hard on this, the councilors in Ward 1. I've been involved for some time trying to work with the neighborhood and CCU, and right when you think that we're close to some sort of an agreement, we just haven't been able to get there. So I understand, and we all support the concerns of the neighborhood in trying to get to the bottom of this, get some relief, and we're going to need CCU also to continue to come to the table, I think, to find some reasonable opportunities to move forward. I do want to also echo, though, there's a lot being said that staff threw this out or this happened, and I think there needs to be a true conversation as to what really happened. And I don't feel comfortable just saying somehow staff pulled something out and council just, you know, went forward with it. So I think there needs to be more of a background as to how we really got here, what happened, and I'm just not willing to stand here and say that somehow staff misled council and threw something out, and there's all kinds of other areas that this could have happened. Mr. Cox.
Just quickly, Mr. Mayor, and first of all, I don't know the circumstances that led to that language being pulled. It was a long process, and it was a long time ago, so I'm not sure the answer to that. But I was asked just recently to solicit a legal opinion on what we consider the key legal issues surrounding this whole dispute, and I received that just this afternoon. Haven't even finished going through. It's pretty comprehensive and addresses a couple of issues that have not been openly talked about, but it's an attorney-client privilege memo to the city council, and you'll be getting that tomorrow, and I invite you to take a look at that and see how it affects your view of the situation. So,
well, I appreciate that. And again, I'll just echo that the neighbors want action, and you know, they deserve to see that opportunity. And I think December 2nd, the person who brought this forward is amenable to that, and I think that's doable. Mayor Pro Tem.
My comments on how this happened come straight from Mr. Parker via an open records request filed by Ms. Johnson. That was the gist of his comments to that, and that's why I had hoped he would be here tonight to help us clarify that. I am not accusing, I'm not saying that they did that with any malintent. I'm just saying that that is what how it happened according to Mr. Parker. I would be more than happy to have him explain that again to the entire council. But I don't think there was anything nefarious in that action.
All right, so we have consensus then for December 2nd. Okay, thank you. All right, the next one probably should go real fast. So actually I submitted this, and let me back up to some history here as to this next agenda item. And we get these requests, and certainly as mayor, I get these requests all the time for all kinds of issues. And even on our own issues, we've never brought this to the attention of the city council, whether it was 2D or the initiatives that we have on. What led me to this is twofold. There's been quite an interest in public safety, quite a concern in public safety. And we heard from three of our folks tonight, two of our chief law enforcement officers, who I think many have great respect for, some of the issues pertaining to where the county is at. Secondly, every mayor has come on board months ago to support 1A, every mayor in Jefferson County. And every community has taken this up. And so I thought it was important for council not to weigh the merits of 1A tonight, but to weigh the merit of moving this forward for a potential resolution, however that would land, up or down. The city of Arvada has approved, has endorsed 1A. The city of Golden has endorsed 1A. The city of Westminster is voting on that this evening, and the city of Wheat Ridge has endorsed 1A. And we work together as a community in many different fashions. And I think it's at least is worthy of bringing this forward to say, is this something our city council would like to join the other cities in the community in supporting? And you heard a little bit tonight from our sheriff and from our district attorney. And so that is my ask, not to hash out the merits of 1A this evening, but to ask if you'd like to see that go forward for a resolution. Mayor Pro Tem.
I think we're going to agree on something tonight, Mayor. The ramifications for Lakewood are serious. Our Chief Judge, Municipal Judge, Ms. Davig, has asked that we ensure Lakewood police have access to the county jail because it for their arrestees. If things go unresolved, as the sheriff said, we won't have the access. We won't be able to put our miscreants in county jail, and we certainly have no jail of our own to put them in, so we put them back in on the streets when they probably need some help and some correction. So I will be supporting this because it's a matter of public safety and for all of our residents.
Councilor Harrison.
If we bring this forward, Mr. Mayor, next meeting would be a study session. And then the following week would be another meeting. So we would be actually, if we agreed to bring it forward, 28th, is that right? That's right. The resolution would be in front of you on October 28th. My concern is with waiting that long would be a good share of the ballots have already dropped now. If this council would be willing to muck this out tonight and make a decision because of the fact that people are voting as we speak. I mean, you can say no, but I'm asking about the timing. Do we want to wait until October 28th, where a good share of the mail-in ballots probably are already mailed in, or do we want to do this tonight?
And yes, I'm sorry, I was shaking my head, but I don't think protocol-wise we can do that tonight. I don't think we have a finalized resolution that would be address us and our needs, and I don't think legally, because it has not been posted, that we could do that as well.
And just to nail that down a little bit further, I just pulled up the ordinance section that talks about what exceptions there are for elected officials and public officials to engage in a commentary on ballot questions. And what it says pertinent to this discussion is that there are limits, right, on the ability of council members and others to use public resources to advocate for a ballot question. Well, what he goes on to say in the ordinance is nothing in this ordinance shall be read to prohibit, and it continues on to say the council, board, whatever is the governing body of a particular jurisdiction, from passing a resolution in support or opposition through the normal channels. The page has abandoned me, but it's through the normal channels. And then it goes on to say even promoting the resolution after adoption can only be done through ordinary customary means. You can't take out billboard space is the example we like to use, saying here's the resolution that we adopted. So process is important in order to take advantage of the exception that's in the law.
I understand. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Goodwin.
Ditto to Councilor Abel and to Mayor Paul. I think that when we have our county sheriff and our district attorney in here speaking about the dire consequences, public safety is, I think, one of our community's most important issues, and I believe all of us up here also really find, community safety is the most important thing. So I agree. I think that especially when you look at the numbers and that we're 40% of the people in the jail are initiated in Lakewood, I believe it's our responsibility to join with the other cities in Jefferson County and move this forward and hopefully pass the resolution in support. Thank you.
Councilor Johnson.
Thank you. Well, it's terribly concerning that the county is in this position, and I am very sorry for where they are finding themselves. It's difficult for everybody, and certainly it affects us. But the issue before us tonight is not their beds, but if we are going to support them wanting us to support 1A. That's the issue at hand. The reality is that this is a divisive ballot question. We've got people in our community that are very strong yes, and we have people in our community that are very strong no. Our community is divided. I hate to see us get involved in yet another situation that is going to divide us. I think it is absolutely appropriate for all of you up here to weigh in on this individually, whatever you'd like. But for us as a body politic, it is inappropriate for us to set the precedent of getting involved in county politics. And we certainly do have a role in this. That role is education. That role is to encourage people to vote. That role is to inform people to make sure that you understand what you're voting on. That is totally appropriate for us. And, the uncomfortable elephant in the room is that there was an endorsement made by the sheriff, and I have had numerous people come to me that it has the potential appearance and perception, whether it's true or not, of a quid pro quo. For us to go down this road, to me, we are causing ourselves problems. We need to stay away from it. Please, all of you speak out as individuals, but don't expect us as a body politic to weigh in. Thank you. I will be voting no.
Councilor Bida.
Thank you, Mayor, and I would echo the comments from my colleague, Councilor Johnson, and I have some additional things I think you need to think about. First of all, this is county business, and as Councilor said, it's divisive, and that's why it's on the ballot, so that the people can decide for themselves what they want to do with their tax money. Do they want to allow the county to keep it or not? That's their decision. And for the life of me, I don't understand why we've got these public officials here, and I'm sorry, with all due respect, I don't know what they're doing here tonight lobbying us. We're not the ones that make the decision. They should be out there lobbying the taxpayers and the voters. Those are the people making the decision, not this council. Secondly, I think that we have no business getting involved in county business or school board business or anybody else's business. We got everything we can do to handle Lakewood business. That's what we're elected for. That's our job. That's our job description. And I think it's totally inappropriate for us to be getting involved in somebody else's business, just like I think it's inappropriate, and I don't appreciate it when the county, and they have done it, interferes in our business, and they start telling us how they think, and our taxpayers and our people, how they think they ought to vote on our business. I resent that. I think it's improper for them to do that, and I don't think it's any more appropriate for us to do it. And let me just put another thing. Let's put the shoe on the other foot. It's always fun to put the shoe on the other foot. Think about it. So how would the county feel and the county officials feel if this body decided to pass a resolution opposing 1A? How would they feel about it then? I guarantee you they'd be screaming, hey, that's a totally improper, foul. You have no business interfering in county business. That's what they'd be saying. And so it's either good for the goose and it's good for the gander. We have no business getting involved in that business. It's a matter of principle. The voters don't need our help. They're certainly smart enough to figure it out for themselves. They don't need us telling them how to vote. And I think it's the height of arrogance for this council to think that it's our responsibility to tell them how to vote. And that's what we're doing if we get into this resolution. We're being asked to tip the scales one way or the other, and we have no business doing that. Also, I just don't think endorsements mean anything. Why are we, if we do this, it's going to be very late, as Councilor Harrison pointed out, it's going to be very late in the process. And it's going to be meaningless for us to go through all this, what I call brain damage, but political capital and everything else dealing with this issue, alienating our, many of our residents who are opposed to this, going through all that, and it's going to be meaningless because it's going to end up at the end of the very end of the election cycle anyway. So for all those reasons, I'm going to urge my councilors, vote now. Let's put this to bed right now, and let's let the voters, let's let our constituents and our voters decide for themselves what they want to do on 1A, regardless of which side of 1A you're on. Let the voters decide. That's why it's at an election. That's all I've got.
Thank you. Councilor Raybal.
Well, I agree with Councilor Bida and Councilor Johnson, and I'll just say ditto and make it short and sweet. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Skilling.
Somewhat deja vu, if I recall correctly. This was 5A, 5B, when we were having the same exact discussion on endorsing. I think we came down on the side of not doing anything as a body, but a bunch of us, me included, signed a letter to the editor, and we came out in our individual support for it. I have a lot of personal feelings about Tabor. And I certainly had personal feelings about 3A, 3B, and obviously 2D. But my position hasn't changed since then. That's not, I don't think that that's our place to be endorsing one way or another, regardless of our personal feelings on it. My only other point, Lakewood's in a tough spot because, in some respects, Jeffco's our vendor for providing the jail space. So we're in a very strange position. It's our vendors telling us, if you don't approve this, you're going to lose out on these beds. And that puts us in an awkward position. Doesn't change my original feeling that that's not the role of this body to be endorsing it one way or another. But it does give me concerns. I'm not particularly fond of that vendor and the head of that vendor, coming here and telling us this is all the bad stuff that's going to happen. I haven't heard about if there's any other cuts that they can make in the departments. It just goes straight to the scariest thing that anyone can imagine. And that doesn't sit too well. But these are all personal things. This isn't something that the body is going to sit up here and debate that. We're going to look through Jeffco's budget. I pulled it up today and was looking through their 2019 budget. We can debate that. There's 6 pages on the sheriff's stuff, but I don't think that's our role. So I'm just going back to 5A, 5B, and if my memory's wrong on that, then I stand corrected. But I thought we've already had this discussion, and we came down on the side of we're not going to get involved in that, regardless of whether we individually support it.
Okay. And certainly that's why I said I don't take this lightly to bring this forward. And it's not a personality thing. It's not a politic thing. It's not a scare factor. You have two of the most respected law enforcement folks in all the state of Colorado coming here, not to scare you, but to tell you the reality. And when this council is here talking about crime and concerned about crime, and they're saying we will close down jail beds, I take them at their word that they'll close down jail beds. And to think that it has to do with some sort of endorsement is pretty disrespectful to those elected officials who are here. We have every opportunity to go before that body. We have gone before that body. And I'm sorry if you don't know the county's budget, but you live in the county too, and they're a vendor because they have to be the vendor. They are, by law, statutorily, that's what they provide. They provide jail for all the municipalities. So, you know, it's a tough one, and I think when things get tough, you got to find leaders, and you have to be able to talk about these tough issues with the community. And there are other communities that are much different than ours, much more to the left, much more to the right, that saw it important enough to take a look and say, this means real dollars to our community. This means real impacts to our public safety. And whether or not people listen to us or not, I think it's important that we have a tradition of working together throughout the county and recognizing that what happens in Jeffco affects the city of Lakewood and vice versa. We're dealing with it on homelessness. We deal with it on Jeffcom. We deal with it with a lot of different issues. And, you know, I think it does have strong merits, and you're right. It will bring us to the very end. It'll bring us to the 28th. There's not a lot of time, but I still think it's important and it's worthwhile for a larger conversation. Mayor Pro Tem.
While I agree with you about the need for the jail space and feel kind of like my arms being twisted for this, I do not agree that people who are not of the same thoughts that I have are disrespectful. I think we're adding, by using those words, we add more divisiveness to an already controversial subject. And for about the second or third time tonight, I've heard someone in leadership up here say that we're just not doing the right thing and we're not being good people if we don't go along with the issue at hand. So my objection is the characterization that anyone, Mr. Skilling, Mr. Beta, Ms. Johnson, or Mr. Roybal is being disrespectful to our county commission. Thank you.
I think my point was that somehow there was a quid pro quo that was coming back because of an endorsement. Councilor Franks.
Thanks, Mayor Paul. Certainly, as we can hear from what's going on from the dais, it's a very passionate topic. And what I would like to say is, as always, I'm amazingly proud of Ward 4. They're good question askers. They're looking deep at the information. I absolutely agree with Councilor Skilling. Our ward doesn't need us to tell them how to vote. Sometimes they need us to help connect them to information. We've reached out for information. We want answers on certain questions, decision points, and budget things. And I think it is a very personal decision. But I, as I did with 5A and 5B, agreed with the council that I do not think it's our we should not be taking a council position. Individuals can certainly do that and sign on. I saw they have a web page where they're amassing the list of names. It is a very long list of names for those interested. I just don't believe it's our role. I think our role is to help educate people, to help connect them to the information that they need, to deepen the conversation. That way, when the decision is made, people feel confident that they made it based on the facts of the matter and how they feel about their own personal finances. So I appreciate all the passion, but I don't see the point of moving this forward. I think it is a decision that our community needs to make, certainly with our support where we can connect them to that information. So I won't be supportive of moving this forward, not because I certainly don't care about safety. We all care about safety. I think that goes without question, but certainly there's other budgetary ways to get to certain things, so they may have to make some different choices if it is something that doesn't pass, and if it does pass, then the community will have spoken. So I think that's an important thing that we all just need to respect, is that we agreed to stay out of other ones because we wanted our community to make a decision, and we can individually encourage those decisions if we choose.
Thank you. And I would just echo, that's what the resolution does. It puts out that information that you just stated as to what it does. So, you know, I get a sense that it could go forward, but it'd be divisive, and so I'm not going to take it forward any further. I think it would look worse if it was divisive on something this important. So I will withdraw that request, and I do think it's unfortunate, because I think that this is something, again, that we've never taken a look at, but we've also never been in this situation. So, reports, Mayor Pro Tem?
No report.
Councilor Roybal?
No report.
Councilor Gutwein? Councilor Skilling? Councilor LeBeer? Councilor Harrison? Councilor Franks?
I'll be quick. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who came out for our shred day and for the cleanup day. We know it was amazingly popular, which meant that some folks maybe waited in line longer than they had expected to. But please know that staff is looking at all of that, looking at the attendance, looking at how that was routed. We know it was very popular. We certainly appreciate all of you, and certainly look forward to the next event that we're able to host. We just know that you so appreciate the service. We saw good things where people were like, I was able to take in X amount of boxes to get shred, or I was able to take a TV and a monitor. So we know we served a lot of people, and certainly will work to always do better for future events. Thank you very much.
Councilor Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor Paul. I just want to tell you openly that I honestly respect and appreciate what you just did. Thank you. I know it was hard, and I appreciate it. Thank you, especially since it would have been a division for us. I would also just like to ask Ms. Hodson, I'm not sure what's going on with the Rocket folks. I would be happy to sit down with you and with them and see if we can't have some kind of meaningful conversation. I've met with some of the parents. They're good people. They're trying to get their kids to have this keep going. I'd love to sit down with you if that's possible.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. And staff is still working on that, and we've given them a one-year extension to allow for that work and those conversations to be had. I actually personally heard from a representative of the Model Rocket Club or group that really appreciated that. So we're going back to the table. And in fact, we've also heard from the Corps of Engineers. So it hasn't died. We're still working to find a good resolution.
Thank you. And also, backing up your comment about the Veterans Fair, and it sounded like you had 400 or 500 people. I just would like to again say that idea was actually initiated by Councilor Roybal and Scott Hefty, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago. It started at the community center. It has really grown. Pete was in the service, 24 years, 21 years? 21 years. And he is passionate about his veterans, his buddies, his brothers, and he does a lot to make sure that they are taken care of. He personally pays for some of them to have overnight stay. So I just want to have kudos to Councilor Roybal for what he did there.
Just for clarification, this is our 7th year. And thank you to Councilor Roybal for all of your work, and thank you for being there this year as well. And we had 300 veterans who attended.
Councilor Bida.
Just one quick comment, Mayor. Thank you for acknowledging my good friend Ruben Valdez. He was a giant in the community. He was way ahead of his time. He was a mentor of mine, believe it or not. We didn't always agree on things, but we did have lots of discussions about leadership and what that's about. And not only that, we played poker regularly, and I will tell you, he was one heck of a poker player, and he could run a bluff better than anybody I ever met. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Vincent. Was he also on GOCO? Was he a representative on GOCO? I thought for some reason he might have been. Yeah, no, anyways, and I wish we wouldn't have had that, such an informal setting for that proclamation. However, the family had requested it and the services are coming up. So we kind of rushed that. We weren't able to notice that out, but we do have a formal proclamation if anybody's interested, and that will be presented to his family. And then we'll keep you posted on the Betty Proctor. And again, she has I think it's called the Betty Proctor Fund, which benefits the Action Center, and just a giant and really worked hard for her whole life to help those folks in need. I want to mention that we had a beautiful art installation that was opened at Addenbrook Park, and a local artist named Colin Parsons designed that, and it really is stunning, and it's very unique and very different. And if you have a chance, go check it out. It really talks about reflections of where we are. It's built at the old fireplace, so it has that historical piece, and then these kind of doors that you can move through to look at where we're going. So that was the 50th anniversary piece. Ms. Hudson, thank you to you and your staff for putting that all together. And I think there was a lot of community involvement in picking that, but it's really cool. The Riot Fest was a great event, as always, for 40 West Arts. And then I had the opportunity on Saturday to meet with Joseph Niss, who is also known as Scrapper Joe, who's a gentleman who lived on the streets for many years and then in his car, and now had purchased a motorhome and is one of our residents who's living on 8th and Quail. Certainly some sympathetic of where this body had to come from on that issue, and very understanding. And I know that we are going to really work with some of those folks who are living in those motorhomes to see what we can do. But he also had some really good ideas for council and for our staff as to what we can help do, and maybe how we can find better ways to make sure that our homeless who may have a motorhome can still be able to live in the community. So I will share that with you. But I did want to say, for a gentleman who potentially is going to be pushed out, his willingness to sit down and understand where the community was coming from was really appreciated. So that is all I have. Ballots are out, so make sure that you get those in. I think we have 5 drop locations as well as the mail, and we will adjourn. And if there's nothing else from Ms. Millard, Mr. Cox, Ms. Hodson, at 10:20. Agent Hipwell, thank you. Have a good evening.